The Voynich Manuscript, the book no one can read. A book sitting in Yale University's rare book library has driven scholars to madness for over a century. The Voynich Manuscript looks innocent enough, bound in vellum, filled with strange drawings and text. But this medieval book, dating back to the early 15th century, contains a secret that has stumped cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists for generations. The manuscript is written entirely in an unknown script that appears to be a language, but no one can figure out what language it might be. The text flows naturally, following linguistic patterns that suggest it's not just random scribbles. Yet after more than 100 years of intense study, no one has decoded a single word. The book contains roughly 240 pages, filled with bizarre illustrations. There are strange plants that don't match any known species, astronomical diagrams that seem to show zodiacal symbols, mixed with unidentifiable celestial objects. And perhaps most puzzling of all, detailed drawings of naked women bathing in green pools connected by elaborate plumbing systems that look more like something from a spa brochure than a medieval manuscript. The mystery deepens when you consider who owned this book. It's named after Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer who acquired it in 1912, but the manuscript's history before that is murky. Some evidence suggests it once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it, an enormous sum that would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars today. Why would an emperor pay so much for a book unless it contained incredibly valuable information? During World War II, the manuscript caught the attention of the US government's top codebreakers. These were the same experts who were cracking Nazi and Japanese military codes. William Friedman, one of America's greatest cryptographers, spent decades trying to decode it. He applied every technique known to cryptography, used early computer analysis, and recruited teams of scholars. They all failed. Modern computer analysis has only added to the mystery. The text shows statistical properties similar to natural languages. It has the right distribution of common and rare letter combinations, follows patterns you'd expect in real writing. But it doesn't match any known language, living or dead. Some researchers think it might be an elaborate hoax, but creating such a sophisticated fake would have required knowledge of linguistics that didn't exist in medieval times. The illustrations provide no help in decoding the text. The plants look real enough, but botanists can't identify them. They might be stylized versions of known plants, or they could be completely imaginary. The astronomical charts contain recognizable zodiac symbols mixed with mysterious diagrams that don't correspond to any known medieval astronomical texts. Recent carbon dating confirms the manuscript was created in the early 15th century, but this only makes the mystery deeper. What knowledge could have been so important that someone spent months or years creating this elaborate book? And why write it in a code so complex that modern computers can't crack it? The Voynich Manuscript remains one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles, sitting quietly in its climate-controlled case, keeping its secrets locked away from the world. Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old site that changed history. Hidden beneath a hill in southeastern Turkey lies a discovery that has forced archaeologists to rewrite the story of human civilization. Göbekli Tepe, which means Potbelly Hill in Turkish, contains the world's oldest known temple complex. But calling it old doesn't do justice to how ancient this place really is. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,500 BCE. That's roughly 12,000 years ago. To put this in perspective, this temple complex was already ancient when Stonehenge was built. It predates the pyramids of Egypt by about 7,000 years. It was constructed before humans had invented agriculture, before they had domesticated animals, before they had even figured out how to make pottery. According to everything we thought we knew about human development, people 12,000 years ago were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic groups. They shouldn't have had the organization, the motivation, or the technical skills to build massive stone monuments. Yet here stands Göbekli Tepe, demanding we reconsider everything. The site consists of massive stone pillars arranged in circles, some weighing up to 16 tons each. These aren't rough stones, they're carefully carved with intricate reliefs of animals. You'll find scorpions, lions, bulls, wild boars, foxes, and birds, all carved with remarkable skill. The craftsmanship is so sophisticated that it rivals work done thousands of years later by supposedly more advanced civilizations. But here's where the mystery really begins. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed that what we've excavated so far, impressive as it is, represents only about 5% of the total site. There are at least 20 more circles of stones buried beneath the surface, possibly many more. The full scope of Göbekli Tepe could be enormous, making it one of the largest religious complexes ever built. The construction of this site would have required hundreds of people working together for decades. But where did these people come from? How did nomadic hunter-gatherers organize themselves into a workforce capable of quarrying, carving, and moving massive stones? They had no metal tools. Everything would have been done with stone implements. They had no wheels, no domesticated animals to help with the heavy lifting. No written language to coordinate such a complex project. Even more puzzling is the question of why they built it. The common assumption is that humans developed agriculture first, which led to permanent settlements, which eventually gave them the time and resources to build monuments. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite might be true, that the desire to build sacred spaces might have driven the development of agriculture. Some researchers theorize that the need to feed the large groups of people working on Göbekli Tepe forced the surrounding population to develop farming techniques. In other words, religion might have driven the agricultural revolution, not the other way around. Then, there's the mystery of its abandonment. Around 8,000 years ago, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something extraordinary. They deliberately buried the entire complex under tons of earth and rubble. This wasn't gradual abandonment or natural decay. They systematically covered every stone circle, every carved pillar, or the entire site. It was as if they wanted to hide it forever. Why would people spend generations building this magnificent complex only to bury it deliberately? What changed in their society or beliefs that made them want to erase their greatest achievement? We may never know the answer, but their decision to bury Göbekli Tepe is what preserved it for us to find thousands of years later. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has implications far beyond archaeology. It suggests that our ancestors were capable of far more sophisticated thinking and organization than we ever imagined. It raises the possibility that there were other advanced civilizations in the deep past that we haven't discovered yet, or whose achievements have been lost to time. The Piri Reis Map, a 16th century map of the impossible. In 1929, workers renovating the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul made a discovery that would puzzle scholars for decades. Hidden away in the palace archives was a map drawn on gazelle skin, created in 1513 by Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. At first glance, it looked like any other 16th century map, but closer examination revealed something that should have been impossible. The Piri Reis map shows the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and South America with remarkable accuracy. But here's the problem. It also appears to show the northern coast of Antarctica, complete with mountains and rivers. This would be impressive enough for any 16th century map, but there's one major issue. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after Piri Reis drew his map. Even more puzzling, the Antarctic coastline on the map seems to show the continent without its ice sheet. Modern seismic surveys have revealed the actual shape of Antarctica's rocky coastline beneath miles of ice. And it matches remarkably well with what's drawn on this 500-year-old map. The ice sheet that covers Antarctica has been there for millions of years, so how could a 16th century cartographer know what the continent looked like underneath all that ice? Piri Reis himself provides some clues about his sources, but they only deepen the mystery. In notes written on the map itself, He explains that he compiled it from about 20 different source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He mentions using maps from the West Indies, presumably referring to Columbus's voyages, as well as ancient maps that had been preserved in various libraries. But here's where things get really interesting. Some of the source maps Piri Reis claims to have used would have been created long before Europeans even knew the Americas existed. How could ancient cartographers have drawn accurate maps of South America? And if they had such sophisticated knowledge of world geography, what else did they know that we've lost? The mathematical precision of the map is another puzzle. When modern cartographers analyzed the Piri Reis map using computer modeling, they found that it uses a projection system that wasn't officially developed until much later. The map appears to be drawn as if viewed from a point high above Earth, using trigonometric calculations that shouldn't have been available to 16th century map makers. Charles Hapgood, a professor at Keene State College, spent years studying the map in the 1962nd. He concluded that it showed evidence of an advanced ancient civilization that had mapped the entire world, including Antarctica, before it was covered by ice. His work was controversial, but even skeptics admitted that the map contained accurate information that Piri Reis shouldn't have had access to. The accuracy of the South American coastline is particularly striking. The map shows the correct latitudes for various points along the coast, something that was extremely difficult to determine with 16th century navigation techniques. It includes geographical features that weren't explored by Europeans until decades after 1513. Some of these details are so precise that they match modern satellite imagery. But the Antarctic connection remains the most controversial aspect of the map. Critics argue that what looks like Antarctica might actually be a misdrawn South America, or that the similarities to the ice-free Antarctic coastline are just coincidence. However, supporters point out that the scale and positioning of the landmass match Antarctica far better than any other known continent. There's also the question of the ancient source maps that Piri Reis claimed to have used. If such maps existed, where are they now? Were they destroyed in the various disasters that befell ancient libraries, like the fire that consumed much of the Library of Alexandria? Or are they still out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered in forgotten archives? The implications of the Piri Reis map, if taken at face value, are staggering. It would suggest that ancient civilizations possessed far more advanced knowledge of geography and navigation than we've ever imagined. It might mean that there were sophisticated seafaring cultures that explored the entire world thousands of years before we thought such exploration was possible. Whether the map truly shows Antarctica or not, it remains a remarkable document that demonstrates the sophistication of Ottoman cartography and raises fascinating questions about the transmission of geographical knowledge through history. The mystery continues to intrigue researchers and continues to challenge our assumptions about what ancient peoples knew about their world. Unknown Man E, the mummy no one can explain. Deep in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo sits a mummy that has puzzled Egyptologists for over a century. Known only as Unknown Man E, this ancient corpse tells a story of horror and mystery that defies everything we know about Egyptian mummification practices. Unknown Man E was discovered in 1881 as part of a cache of royal mummies found in a tomb near Deir el-Bahari. When archaeologists first unwrapped him, they were shocked by what they found. Unlike other mummies, whose faces had been carefully prepared to look peaceful in death, this man's face was frozen in what appeared to be a scream of agony. His mouth was wide open, his head thrown back, his entire body contorted as if he had died in terrible pain. The mummy's preparation was also completely wrong by Egyptian standards. Instead of being carefully embalmed and wrapped in fine linen, Unknown Man E had been hastily mummified and wrapped in sheepskin, something that was considered ritually unclean by the ancient Egyptians. It was as if whoever prepared his body wanted to ensure he would be tormented in the afterlife as well as in death. Recent CT scans and forensic analysis have revealed even more disturbing details. The man appears to have been around 18 to 20 years old when he died. His hands and feet were bound, and there's no evidence of the typical mummification process. His brain and internal organs were left inside his body to rot. Most shocking of all, some researchers believe he may have been buried alive. The question that has haunted Egyptologists is simple. Who was this young man? And what did he do to deserve such treatment? Many experts believe unknown man E might be Prince Pentawere, son of Pharaoh Ramesses III. Historical records tell us that Pentawere was involved in a conspiracy to assassinate his father around 1155 BCE. The plot, known as the Harem Conspiracy, involved several members of the royal court who wanted to place Pentawere on the throne instead of the designated heir. The conspiracy failed, and the conspirators were put on trial. Ancient court documents record that Pentawere was found guilty and sentenced to death. But as a member of the royal family, he was given the privilege of committing suicide rather than being executed. The records state that he was left in his place. He took his own life. If unknown man E really is Prince Pentawere, it would explain the unusual treatment of his body. As a traitor to the pharaoh, he wouldn't have been given the full honor of proper mummification. As someone who died by suicide, considered a shameful death in ancient Egypt, he would have been denied the rituals needed for a successful journey to the afterlife. But the forensic evidence tells a more complex story. Recent analysis suggests that unknown man E didn't die by hanging or poison, the most common methods of suicide in ancient Egypt. Instead, the evidence points to a more violent end. Some researchers believe he may have been forcibly restrained and left to die, possibly through suffocation or being buried alive while still conscious. The sheepskin wrapping provides another clue. In ancient Egyptian religion, sheep were associated with the god Set, who represented chaos and evil. Wrapping a mummy in sheepskin would have been like condemning the person to eternal damnation. This wasn't just about denying him proper burial rites. It was active punishment that was supposed to continue into the afterlife. Modern forensic techniques have also revealed that unknown man E had good teeth and showed signs of having lived a privileged life, consistent with royal upbringing. His facial features, when reconstructed, bear some resemblance to other members of the royal family from that period. Yet questions remain. If this really is Prince Pentawere, why was his body included in the cache of royal mummies? Why preserve someone who had been condemned to eternal punishment? And why hasn't DNA testing definitively confirmed his identity? Some researchers have suggested alternative theories. Perhaps unknown man E was a foreign prisoner of war, or a criminal who had committed some unspeakable crime. Others wonder if he might have been the victim of some religious ritual that required him to die in terror and agony. The most unsettling possibility is that unknown man E was indeed buried alive, conscious and aware as the wrappings were applied and the tomb was sealed. The expression of horror frozen on his face might be the last moment of a young man who died in unimaginable terror, knowing he was being condemned not just to death, but to an eternity of punishment in the afterlife. Unknown man E remains one of the most disturbing mysteries from ancient Egypt, a reminder that even in a civilization known for its elaborate death rituals and respect for the deceased, there were fates considered worse than death itself. The Suborough Inscription, unsolved code in stone. Hidden away in the English countryside, on the grounds of Suborough Estate in Staffordshire, stands one of Britain's most puzzling mysteries. Carved into a stone monument is a sequence of 8 letters that has defied every attempt at decoding for over 250 years. The inscription appears on what's known as the Shepherd's Monument, built around 1748 by Thomas Anson, a Member of Parliament and brother to Admiral George Anson. The monument itself is a curious thing. It's essentially a stone version of a famous painting by Nicolas Poussin called Et in Arcadia Ego. showing shepherds gathered around a tomb. But it's the cryptic letters carved below the relief that have captured the imagination of codebreakers and conspiracy theorists for centuries. The 8 letters are arranged in a specific pattern: O, U, O, S, V, A, V, V, with the letters D and M flanking the sequence at a lower level. That's it, 10 letters total, with periods between most of them, creating one of the most concise yet baffling codes in history. What makes this inscription so intriguing is not just its mystery, but the caliber of people who have tried and failed to solve it. Charles Dickens spent considerable time puzzling over the letters. Charles Darwin attempted to crack the code. During World War II, British codebreakers from Bletchley Park, the same experts who broke the Enigma code, took a shot at it during their spare time. All failed. The theories about what the letters might mean range from the plausible to the wildly speculative. Some researchers believe it's a memorial inscription, possibly standing for a Latin phrase honoring someone who died. Others think it might be related to the Knights Templar or other secret societies that were popular among English nobility in the 18th century. One of the most persistent theories connects the inscription to the Holy Grail. The Poussin painting that the monument recreates has long been associated with the mystery of Rennes-le-Château in France and various Holy Grail legends. Some believe the letters provide a clue to the location of the Grail or other religious artifacts. But like many Holy Grail theories, this one relies more on wishful thinking than solid evidence. Another theory suggests the letters represent the first letters of a phrase in English or Latin that had personal meaning to the Anson family. This would explain why the code has been so difficult to crack. Without knowing the specific context or personal references, it would be nearly impossible for outsiders to decode. The D and M flanking the main sequence have their own interpretations. Some scholars believe they stand for dis manibus, a Latin phrase meaning to the spirits of the dead, which was commonly used on Roman tombstones. If true, this would support the theory that the inscription is some kind of memorial. Modern computer analysis has revealed some interesting patterns in the letters, but nothing definitive. The sequence doesn't follow the patterns you'd expect from most simple substitution ciphers. It doesn't match common Latin abbreviations or English phrases. The arrangement suggests it might be an acrostic, where the first letters of words form a message, but no one has found a phrase that fits convincingly. The location of the inscription adds another layer to the mystery. Suborough Estate has connections to several historical mysteries and secret societies. Admiral George Anson, Thomas's brother, was one of the most successful naval commanders in British history and amassed enormous wealth from his voyages. Some researchers believe he may have acquired more than just gold and silver during his travels, perhaps ancient manuscripts or artifacts that contained secret knowledge. The estate also has connections to the early Masonic movement. In England, the Anson family were likely members of various societies and organizations that used symbolic codes and hidden meanings. The inscription might be related to these affiliations, comprehensible only to fellow members. In recent years, some researchers have used advanced statistical analysis and pattern recognition software to study the inscription. While these tools have eliminated some theories, they haven't produced a definitive solution. The letters remain as mysterious today as they were when they were first carved. What's particularly frustrating about the Suborough inscription is how tantalizingly simple it appears. It's just 10 letters, not a massive document like the Voynich Manuscript or a complex cipher with hundreds of characters. Yet this simplicity might be exactly what makes it so difficult to solve. With so few letters to work with, there are countless possible interpretations, and no way to verify which one is correct without additional context. The inscription continues to attract amateur codebreakers and conspiracy theorists from around the world. Every few years, someone claims to have solved it, usually with elaborate theories involving the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, or secret maps to hidden treasure. So far, none of these solutions have been convincing enough to satisfy serious scholars. The Suborough Inscription remains one of Britain's great unsolved mysteries, a reminder that sometimes the most profound secrets can be hidden in the simplest forms. The White Pyramid of China, the forbidden megastructure, hidden in the remote mountains of central China, shrouded in government secrecy and local taboos, stands what might be the largest pyramid ever built on Earth. The White Pyramid, as it's known to the few outsiders who have glimpsed it, represents one of archaeology's greatest forbidden mysteries, a massive ancient structure that the Chinese government doesn't want you to know about. The story of the White Pyramid begins during World War II, when American pilot James Gaussman was flying supplies over the Himalayas into China. In 1947, he reported seeing an enormous white pyramid during one of his flights, surrounded by several smaller pyramids in what appeared to be a vast ancient complex. His photographs and eyewitness account were filed away by military intelligence and forgotten for decades. In the 1992nd, German archaeologist Hartwig Hausdorff managed to visit the region and confirmed that massive pyramid structures do indeed exist in China's Shaanxi province. His photographs showed enormous earthen mounds covered in vegetation, clearly artificial and far larger than Egypt's Great Pyramid. But getting accurate information about these structures has proven nearly impossible due to Chinese government restrictions and local reluctance to discuss them. What makes the White Pyramid so mysterious isn't just its size, though by some estimates it stands nearly 1,000 feet tall, with a base covering almost 1,500 square feet, making it roughly twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The real mystery is why the Chinese government has gone to such lengths to keep these structures secret from the outside world. The area around the pyramids has been declared off-limits to foreign researchers and tourists. Chinese authorities have planted fast-growing trees and vegetation to camouflage the structures from satellite imagery. Local farmers have been relocated away from the pyramid sites, and the few Chinese archaeologists who have studied the structures have been prohibited from publishing their findings internationally. This level of secrecy suggests that whatever the Chinese government has found at these sites, they consider it too sensitive to share with the world. Some researchers believe the pyramids might contain historical evidence that contradicts official Chinese historical narratives, or perhaps artifacts that reveal inconvenient truths about ancient Chinese civilization. The little information that has leaked out about the White Pyramid is tantalizing. Some reports suggest that the structure is much older than the famous pyramids of Egypt, possibly dating back 8,000 years or more. If true, this would make it one of the oldest large-scale architectural projects in human history, predating most other known civilizations. Local legends speak of the pyramids as the burial places of ancient Chinese emperors from dynasties so old they've been forgotten by official history. Some stories claim the pyramids contain vast underground chambers filled with treasure and ancient technology. Others suggest they're connected to China's legendary Yellow Emperor, a mythical figure said to have ruled China over 4,000 years ago. What's particularly intriguing is that the White Pyramid is just one of many similar structures in the region. Satellite imagery and occasional eyewitness reports suggest there might be dozens of pyramids scattered across central China, forming what could be the largest pyramid complex ever built. Some are clearly ancient, covered in soil and vegetation after millennia of neglect. Others appear to be in better condition, suggesting they might have been maintained or even actively used until relatively recent times. The construction techniques used to build these pyramids remain completely unknown. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which are built from stone blocks, the Chinese pyramids appear to be constructed primarily of earth and clay. This would actually make them more difficult to build in some ways. Earth structures of this size would require sophisticated knowledge of engineering and drainage to prevent collapse over time. Recent aerial photography has revealed that many of the pyramids are aligned with astronomical phenomena, sunrise and sunset positions, star constellations, and other celestial events. This suggests they weren't just burial monuments, but served some kind of astronomical or religious purpose. The precision of these alignments indicates the builders had advanced knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. The vegetation that has been deliberately planted to camouflage the pyramids has had an interesting side effect. It's actually helped preserve the structures. The root systems have stabilized the earth construction, preventing erosion that might have destroyed the pyramids over time. In trying to hide their ancient monuments, the Chinese government may have inadvertently saved them. Some researchers have suggested that the Chinese pyramids might be connected to similar structures found across Asia, in Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. This could indicate the existence of an ancient pyramid-building culture that spread across the continent, possibly predating the more famous pyramid builders of Egypt and Central America. The implications of the White Pyramid and its sister structures are potentially enormous. If these monuments are as old and sophisticated as some researchers believe, they could represent evidence of advanced ancient civilizations in China that have been completely lost to history. They might force us to reconsider our understanding of how early human societies developed and spread across the globe. But until the Chinese government allows open archaeological investigation of these sites, the White Pyramid will remain one of history's most frustrating mysteries, a massive ancient monument that we know exists but can't properly study. It's a reminder that there are still enormous secrets hidden in our world, protected not by time and distance, but by political barriers that keep the truth locked away from human knowledge. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan, the abandoned monument. In a granite quarry in southern Egypt lies a monument that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan represents one of ancient Egypt's greatest failures, and one of our greatest windows into how the impossible was made possible. This massive block of granite, still attached to the bedrock, would have been the largest obelisk ever created if it had been completed. Standing roughly 137 feet tall and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, it would have dwarfed every other obelisk in Egypt. But something went wrong during its creation around 1,500 years ago, and the ancient craftsmen abandoned their work, leaving behind a mystery that continues to baffle engineers and archaeologists today. The obelisk was likely commissioned during the reign of Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most powerful female pharaohs. Hatshepsut was known for her ambitious building projects, and this obelisk would have been the crowning achievement of her reign. But as the workers neared completion of the carving process, disaster struck. Cracks appeared in the granite, fatal flaws that would have made the obelisk impossible to transport and erect. Rather than try to salvage the project, the workers simply walked away, leaving their tools, their work ramps, and their partially completed monument exactly as they were. It's as if they just stopped mid-chisel and never came back. What makes the unfinished obelisk so fascinating isn't just its size, but what it reveals about ancient Egyptian stoneworking techniques. For centuries, archaeologists have wondered how the Egyptians managed to quarry, transport, and erect massive granite obelisks with such precision. The abandoned worksite at Aswan provides unprecedented insight into their methods. The evidence carved into the rock shows that Egyptian workers used surprisingly simple tools to shape the granite. They created lines of holes along the surface of the stone, then inserted wooden wedges that were soaked with water. As the wood expanded, it created enough pressure to split the rock along predetermined lines. For finer work, they used copper tools and abrasive sand to slowly grind away the granite. But the scale of this operation is what's truly mind-boggling. The workers would have had to remove roughly 1,200 tons of granite chips and dust to create the obelisk's basic shape. They did this working in a quarry where summer temperatures routinely exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, using only hand tools and human labor. The logistics of the project become even more staggering when you consider what would have happened if the obelisk had been completed successfully. Moving a 1,200-ton granite monument from the quarry to the Nile River, a distance of several miles, would have required engineering skills that rival anything we can do today. Even with modern equipment, moving such a massive piece of stone would be an enormous challenge. The ancient Egyptians would have had to construct special roads, build massive sledges, and coordinate the efforts of thousands of workers. Some estimates suggest that moving the completed obelisk would have required the labor of 3,000 people, working in perfect coordination. One mistake could have resulted in the destruction of years of work and possibly the death of many workers. Once at the Nile, the obelisk would have had to be loaded onto a specially constructed barge for transport to its final destination. Ancient records describe barges built specifically for transporting obelisks, some of which were over 200 feet long. The engineering required to build a boat capable of carrying 1,200 tons of granite without sinking would have pushed ancient shipbuilding to its absolute limits. The final step, erecting the obelisk at its destination, would have been perhaps the most dangerous part of the entire operation. The ancient Egyptians had developed techniques for raising obelisks that involved massive earth ramps and precise coordination of hundreds of workers. But with a monument this size, there would have been almost no margin for error. Modern engineers who have studied the unfinished obelisk are divided on whether the ancient Egyptians could have successfully completed the project, even if the granite hadn't cracked. Some believe the monument was simply too large for the technology of the time, that the workers had pushed their stoneworking techniques beyond what was practically possible. Others argue that, if anyone could have pulled it off, it would have been the ancient Egyptians. Their track record of successfully quarrying, transporting, and erecting dozens of other obelisks proves they had mastered these techniques. The unfinished obelisk might represent them pushing the boundaries of what was possible, testing the limits of their engineering knowledge. The cracks that doomed the project are still visible today, running through the granite like scars that tell the story of ancient ambition meeting the immutable laws of geology. These flaws in the stone weren't something the workers could have predicted or prevented. They were hidden weaknesses that only revealed themselves after months or years of careful work had already been completed. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan stands as a monument to human ambition and the limits of ancient technology. It's a reminder that even the most skilled craftsmen in history sometimes bit off more than they could chew, and that failure can sometimes teach us more about the past than success ever could. The Longyou Caves, the underground enigma, with no builders. In 1992, a local resident in Longyou County, in China's Zhejiang province, decided to pump the water out of a pond on his property. What he discovered beneath the murky water changed everything we thought we knew about ancient Chinese engineering, and left archaeologists with one of the most baffling mysteries in the world. Hidden under the water was the entrance to a massive artificial cave system that had been forgotten for over 2,000 years. The Longyou Caves, as they came to be known, represent one of the most extraordinary feats of ancient engineering ever discovered, and one of the most mysterious. What the farmer had stumbled upon wasn't just a single cave, but an entire underground complex consisting of 24 enormous artificial caverns carved directly out of solid rock. Each cave is massive, some with ceilings 30 feet high and floor areas large enough to house thousands of people. The total volume of rock that was removed to create this underground city is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. The precision of the carving is what makes the Longyou Caves so remarkable. Every surface shows clear tool marks, indicating that the entire complex was deliberately excavated by human hands. The walls, floors, and ceilings display consistent chisel patterns that suggest highly organized work crews using standardized techniques. The craftsmanship is so uniform that it appears to have been done according to detailed architectural plans. But here's the mystery that has stumped every expert who has studied the caves. There is no historical record of this massive construction project anywhere in Chinese history. No ancient texts mention the caves. No local legends speak of their creation. No archaeological evidence points to who built them or why. It's as if someone excavated nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock and then completely erased themselves from history. The engineering challenges involved in creating the Longyou Caves would have been enormous. The builders had to remove all that excavated rock from underground chambers with only primitive tools and human labor. They needed sophisticated ventilation systems to keep workers from suffocating in the depths. They required precise planning to prevent cave-ins and ensure structural stability. Yet they accomplished all of this without leaving behind a single record of how or why they did it. Modern engineers who have studied the caves are amazed by the advanced techniques that must have been used. The cave system shows evidence of sophisticated drainage systems to prevent flooding. The chambers are reinforced with carefully designed support pillars that distribute weight efficiently. The ventilation shafts are positioned to create natural air circulation throughout the complex. These aren't the work of amateur diggers. They represent advanced engineering knowledge. The amount of labor required would have been staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that excavating the caves would have required thousands of workers laboring continuously for decades. The project would have demanded enormous resources, food to feed the workers, tools to replace those worn out by constant use against solid rock, and organizational systems to coordinate such a massive undertaking. What makes the mystery even deeper is that the caves appear to have been deliberately flooded and abandoned. The chambers show no signs of having been used for storage, habitation, or any other obvious purpose after their construction was completed. It's as if the builders completed this monumental project and then simply walked away, allowing the caves to fill with water and disappear from human memory. Some researchers have theorized that the caves might have been built as underground cities for protection during times of war. Ancient China saw numerous periods of conflict when populations might have needed secure underground refuges. But the caves show no evidence of long-term habitation, no living quarters, no storage areas for food or supplies, no defensive features that would be necessary for a military stronghold. Another theory suggests the caves might have been religious or ceremonial sites, perhaps connected to ancient Chinese spiritual practices that involved underground rituals. Some of the chambers have acoustic properties that could have been used for religious ceremonies. But again, there's no archaeological evidence to support this theory. No religious artifacts, no ceremonial objects, no inscriptions or decorations that would indicate spiritual use. The dating of the caves presents another puzzle. Based on the excavation techniques and tool marks, most experts believe they were created sometime during China's spring and autumn period, roughly 2,500 years ago. But without historical records or datable artifacts, it's impossible to pin down the exact time of construction or identify the culture responsible for building them. Recent attempts to use ground-penetrating radar and other modern surveying techniques have revealed that there may be additional chambers that haven't been discovered yet. The full extent of the Longyou Cave system might be even larger than what's currently known. Each new discovery only adds to the mystery of who could have undertaken such a massive project without leaving any trace in the historical record. The Longyou Caves represent one of ancient China's greatest engineering achievements and one of archaeology's most frustrating mysteries. They demonstrate that our ancestors were capable of far more sophisticated underground construction than we ever imagined. But they also remind us how much of human history has been lost to time, how entire civilizations can accomplish incredible feats and then vanish so completely that we're left to puzzle over their achievements thousands of years later. The caves remain open to researchers today, their empty chambers echoing with unanswered questions about the mysterious people who carved them from solid rock and then disappeared into the mists of history. The Nazca Lines, messages for the gods. Carved into the desert floor of southern Peru are some of the most enigmatic artworks ever created by human hands. The Nazca Lines consist of hundreds of geometric designs, animal figures, and straight lines that stretch across nearly 200 square miles of barren plateau. But here's the strange part. Most of these designs are so large that they can only be properly viewed from the air, at an altitude of at least 1,000 feet. The Nazca people created these massive geoglyphs between 500 BCE and 500 CE, during a time when human flight was supposedly impossible. So why did they spend generations creating artwork that they could never properly see? And how did they achieve such precise, large-scale designs without being able to view their work from above? The lines themselves are deceptively simple in construction, but incredibly complex in execution. The Nazca people created them by removing the dark surface stones to reveal lighter-colored earth beneath. In the extremely dry climate of the Nazca Desert, these cleared areas have remained visible for over 1,500 years. But the precision and scale of the designs suggest sophisticated planning and engineering knowledge. Some of the geometric lines stretch for miles across the desert floor in perfectly straight lines. Creating such straight lines over distances of 10 or 15 miles, across varied terrain, and without the ability to see the overall design from above, would challenge even modern surveyors with advanced instruments. The Nazca people accomplished this with only basic tools and human sight lines. The animal figures are even more impressive. The famous Nazca spider measures 150 feet across. The hummingbird stretches nearly 320 feet from beak to tail. The monkey figure covers an area larger than 2 football fields. Each of these designs maintains perfect proportions despite their enormous size, suggesting the artists had some method of scaling up their designs with mathematical precision. Modern attempts to recreate Nazca lines, using only the tools and techniques available to ancient people, have met with mixed success. While it's possible to create straight lines and simple geometric shapes, the complex animal figures with their perfect proportions remain extremely difficult to reproduce without aerial guidance. The purpose of the Nazca lines has been debated for decades. The most widely accepted theory among archaeologists is that they had religious significance, possibly serving as pathways for ritual processions or as offerings to sky gods. The Nazca people lived in one of the world's driest deserts, where water was always scarce. Many of the lines point towards sources of water or align with astronomical events related to the rainy season. But some aspects of the lines resist easy explanation. Why create figures so large that no human could see them in their entirety? If they were meant as messages to gods in the sky, why include geometric patterns alongside recognizable animals? And why did the Nazca people continue creating new lines for nearly 1,000 years? One of the most controversial theories about the Nazca lines was proposed by Swiss author Erich von Däniken, who suggested they were landing strips for ancient aircraft or signals to extraterrestrial visitors. While mainstream archaeology has thoroughly debunked these ideas, they continue to capture public imagination because they address the central mystery. Why create massive artworks that can only be properly appreciated from the air? Recent research has revealed that the Nazca lines are just part of a much larger tradition of geoglyph creation that extended across ancient Peru. Similar designs have been found throughout the region, some even older than the famous Nazca examples. This suggests that creating large-scale ground drawings was an important cultural practice across multiple ancient civilizations. Advanced imaging techniques have also revealed previously unknown lines and figures. Satellite imagery and drone surveys have identified hundreds of new geoglyphs, including some that are so faded they're barely visible, even from the air. The total number of individual designs may exceed 10,000, making the Nazca lines one of the largest artistic endeavors in human history. The preservation of the lines is another remarkable aspect of the mystery. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, receiving less than an inch of rainfall per year. This extreme aridity combined with minimal wind and the stable geological conditions of the plateau, has kept the lines visible for over 1,500 years. In most other climates, such surface markings would have disappeared within decades. Climate change and human activity now threaten the line's preservation. Increased rainfall due to El Niño events has caused some erosion. Illegal mining and development have damaged several figures. Even tourism, ironically, poses a threat. The vibrations from aircraft flying overhead to give tourists aerial views of the lines may contribute to their gradual deterioration. The Nazca Lines remain one of Peru's greatest cultural treasures and one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. They demonstrate the sophisticated planning abilities and mathematical knowledge of ancient people, while simultaneously challenging our understanding of why such massive, viewable only from above artworks were created in the first place. Whether they served as astronomical calendars, religious pathways, or messages to sky gods, the Nazca Lines represent a unique achievement in human artistic expression, a testament to ancient people's desire to create something permanent and meaningful, even if they could never see their completed masterpieces with their own eyes. The Antikythera Mechanism. The ancient computer. In 1901, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered a Roman shipwreck filled with treasures. Among the marble statues and pottery was a corroded lump of bronze that seemed unremarkable compared to the other artifacts. But this corroded mass would eventually be recognized as the most sophisticated piece of ancient technology ever discovered. A device so advanced that nothing comparable appeared again for over 1,000 years. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, is an ancient Greek analog computer dating to around 100 BCE. When researchers finally understood what they were looking at, it revolutionized our understanding of ancient Greek technological capabilities and raised profound questions about what other advanced knowledge might have been lost to history. The device consists of at least 37 interlocking bronze gears housed in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox. When complete, it would have had dials, knobs, and displays that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets with remarkable accuracy. It could calculate lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance and track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. What makes the mechanism so extraordinary isn't just its complexity, but its precision. The gear ratios used in the device accurately reflect the ancient Greek understanding of planetary motion and lunar cycles. Some of the calculations it performs are accurate to within 1 part in millions, a level of precision that rivals modern mechanical timepieces. The craftsmanship required to create such a device would have been extraordinary even by today's standards. The individual gear teeth are smaller than a millimeter and cut with incredible precision. The mechanism contains differential gears, a technology that wasn't supposed to have been invented until the 17th century. The complexity of the gear trains rivals that of 18th century clockwork. For decades after its discovery, archaeologists didn't know what to make of the mechanism. Early examinations revealed gears and bronze dials, but the full complexity wasn't understood until X-ray imaging revealed the internal structure. Even then, it took decades of study to figure out how all the pieces worked together. The breakthrough came when researchers realized they were looking at an ancient planetarium, a mechanical model of the cosmos that could demonstrate the movements of celestial bodies. The device could show not just where planets would be on any given date, but also predict eclipses, track the phases of the moon, and calculate the timing of various ancient festivals tied to astronomical events. But the Antikythera Mechanism raises as many questions as it answers. If ancient Greeks could build such sophisticated mechanical computers, why don't we have more examples of similar devices? The technology required to create this mechanism implies a tradition of advanced metalworking and precision engineering that should have left other traces in the archaeological record. Some researchers believe the mechanism represents the pinnacle of a lost tradition of ancient Greek technology. They argue that similar devices probably existed, but were made from materials that didn't preserve well, or were melted down for their valuable bronze over the centuries. The Antikythera device might have survived only because it was lost at sea, protected from scavenging and corrosion. The historical context makes the device even more remarkable. It was created during a period when the ancient world was in political turmoil, with constant wars between Greek city-states and the growing power of Rome. Yet someone had the resources, knowledge, and time to create an incredibly sophisticated astronomical calculator. This suggests that advanced scientific and technological work continued even during periods of political instability. Recent research has revealed that the mechanism was far more complex than initially realized. Computer modeling has shown that it probably contained additional gear trains that tracked the movements of all 5 planets known to ancient astronomers. It may have been able to predict not just lunar eclipses, but also the rare and spectacular solar eclipses that occur when the moon passes between Earth and the Sunday. The device also demonstrates the sophisticated astronomical knowledge of ancient Greeks. The gear ratios built into the mechanism accurately reflect ancient understanding of planetary periods and lunar cycles. Some of this knowledge was based on centuries of careful observation and mathematical calculation, representing one of humanity's first attempts to create a scientific model of the cosmos. Modern attempts to recreate the Antikythera mechanism have proven challenging even with modern tools and techniques. The precision required to cut gear teeth small enough to fit in the device pushes the limits of what's possible with hand tools. The mathematical knowledge needed to calculate the proper gear ratios was advanced even by ancient standards. The mechanism has also revealed new information about ancient Greek manufacturing techniques. The gears show evidence of being cut using some kind of template system, suggesting that ancient craftsmen had developed standardized methods for creating precise mechanical components. This implies a level of industrial organization that historians hadn't previously recognized in the ancient world. Perhaps most intriguingly, the mechanism suggests that ancient Greeks may have had a more sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics than we realized. Some of the calculations built into the device wouldn't be matched by European astronomers until the Renaissance, over 1,000 years later. The Antikythera mechanism stands as proof that ancient civilizations were capable of far more sophisticated technology than we often assume. It represents a pinnacle of ancient engineering and scientific knowledge, while simultaneously reminding us how much knowledge has been lost over the centuries. In the corroded bronze gears of this ancient computer, we glimpse what might have been, a world where ancient scientific knowledge continued to develop and flourish, rather than being lost to war, neglect, and time. The Yonaguni Monument, Japan's underwater mystery. Off the coast of Japan's westernmost island lies one of the most controversial archaeological discoveries of modern times. The Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater structure discovered in 1987, has divided the scientific community and raised profound questions about ancient civilizations and rising sea levels. The monument consists of enormous stone formations lying 75 feet beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The structures include what appear to be terraced pyramids, wide stone platforms, and carved steps that stretch for hundreds of feet. The formations are so regular and geometric that they seem unmistakably artificial, yet they lie in waters that have been submerged for thousands of years. Japanese marine geologist Masaaki Kimura has spent decades studying the Yonaguni Monument, and he's convinced it represents the ruins of an ancient civilization. The structures show what appear to be tool marks, right-angle cuts, and precisely carved steps that would be virtually impossible to create through natural geological processes. Some formations include what look like roads, drainage systems, and even carved faces that bear resemblance to ancient statuary. The monument's most striking feature is a massive stepped pyramid that rises nearly 80 feet from the ocean floor. The structure has flat terraces connected by steep steps, creating a design that closely resembles pyramid complexes found in other parts of the world. The precision of the terracing and the uniformity of the step heights suggest careful human planning and construction. But if the Yonaguni Monument is artificial, it raises staggering questions about when it was built. Sea level research indicates that this area of the ocean has been underwater for at least 12,000 years, at the end of the last ice age. This would mean the monument predates all known advanced civilizations and was built by peoples we have no record of in human history. The controversy surrounding Yonaguni stems from the fierce disagreement among experts about whether the formations are natural or artificial. Mainstream archaeologists argue that the structures result from natural geological processes, that tectonic activity and erosion could have created formations that only appear to be man-made. They point out that the rock in the area naturally fractures in geometric patterns that could produce step-like formations. However, supporters of the artificial theory point to specific features that seem impossible to explain through geology alone. These include perfectly straight edges that extend for hundreds of feet, right-angle joints between massive stone blocks, and carved details that show clear evidence of tool marks. They argue that while natural processes might create some geometric formations, the complexity and precision of the Yonaguni structures go far beyond what geology could produce. Recent underwater archaeological expeditions have uncovered additional evidence that supports the artificial theory. Divers have found what appear to be stone tools and pottery fragments near the monument, though their age and association with the structures remain disputed. Some formations show evidence of quarrying activities, with sections that appear to have been deliberately removed rather than naturally eroded. The monument's location adds another dimension to the mystery. Yonaguni Island has been inhabited for thousands of years and has a rich tradition of stoneworking and monument construction. The island contains numerous confirmed ancient stone structures, including burial sites and ceremonial platforms. If ancient peoples were building sophisticated stone monuments on the island, it's not unreasonable to think they might have built similar structures in areas that are now underwater. Computer modeling of ancient sea levels has shown that during the last ice age, when ocean levels were much lower, the area around Yonaguni would have been dry land. The monument could have been built on a coastal plain that was gradually submerged as glaciers melted and sea levels rose. This scenario would explain how ancient peoples could have constructed such massive stoneworks in an area that's now deep underwater. The discovery has implications far beyond archaeology. If the Yonaguni Monument is indeed artificial and dates to the end of the Ice Age, it would suggest that advanced civilizations existed much earlier than previously thought. It would mean that humans were capable of large-scale construction projects and sophisticated stoneworking techniques thousands of years before the rise of known ancient civilizations. The monument has also drawn attention to the possibility that many other ancient sites may be submerged beneath the world's oceans. During the Ice Age, sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today, exposing vast areas of what is now the continental shelf. If ancient peoples lived in these coastal areas, which would have been prime real estate with access to both marine and terrestrial resources, evidence of their civilizations would now lie beneath hundreds of feet of water. Recent advances in underwater archaeology and sonar mapping have revealed other potential underwater structures around the world. Similar formations have been reported off the coasts of India, Cuba, and the Mediterranean, though most remain poorly studied due to the challenges and expense of underwater archaeological work. The debate over Yonaguni reflects broader questions about how we study and understand the ancient past. Traditional archaeology has focused on land-based sites, but climate change and rising sea levels mean that some of the most important ancient sites may now be underwater. As technology improves and underwater exploration becomes more feasible, we may discover that our understanding of ancient civilizations has been limited by our inability to explore submerged landscapes. Whether the Yonaguni Monument is natural or artificial It has already changed how archaeologists think about ancient civilizations and the effects of climate change on the archaeological record. It serves as a reminder that the ocean depths may hold secrets about human history that we're only beginning to explore. The monument continues to attract researchers, divers, and mystery enthusiasts from around the world, all drawn to the possibility that beneath the waves lies evidence of a lost chapter in human civilization. The Sacsayhuamán Walls, the impossible stone fortress. High in the Andes Mountains, above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, stands one of the most perplexing construction achievements in human history. Sacsayhuamán is a massive stone fortress, with walls built from blocks so perfectly fitted that you cannot slide a knife blade between them. But what makes these walls truly mysterious isn't just their precision, it's the sheer impossibility of how they were built. The largest stones in the Sacsayhuamán Walls weigh over 200 tons each. These massive blocks of limestone and andesite were quarried from sites miles away, transported up steep mountain slopes, and fitted together with tolerances that would challenge modern construction equipment. The blocks are cut in complex, irregular shapes, with multiple angles and curves. Yet they lock together so perfectly that the walls have survived devastating earthquakes for over 500 years. When Spanish conquistadors first saw Sacsayhuamán in the 16th century, they couldn't believe it was built by human hands. They assumed it must be the work of demons or giants, because they couldn't imagine how ordinary people could move such enormous stones and fit them together so precisely. Even today, with all our modern technology, engineers struggle to explain how the Inca accomplished this feat. The precision of the stonework defies explanation. Each massive block has been carved to fit perfectly with its neighbors, creating joints so tight that they're virtually seamless. The stones don't just touch at their faces, they interlock in 3 dimensions, with complex internal angles that distribute weight and provide incredible stability. This isn't simple stacking. It's sophisticated engineering that rivals anything we can do today. The construction techniques remain completely unknown. The Inca had no wheels, no iron tools, no cranes or pulleys, and no domesticated animals strong enough to move multi-ton stones. They supposedly accomplished all of this with bronze tools, wooden levers, and human labor. Yet somehow, they managed to transport 200-ton blocks up mountainsides and position them with millimeter precision. Modern experiments attempting to replicate Inca construction techniques have had limited success. Researchers have shown that it's possible to move large stones using ramps, rollers, and coordinated human effort. But these experiments typically involve stones weighing a few tons, far smaller than the massive blocks used at Sacsayhuamán. Scaling up these techniques to handle 200-ton stones presents challenges that no one has successfully solved. The quarrying process presents its own mysteries. The stones came from quarries several miles away from the construction site, including some across the valley that would have required crossing rivers and traversing difficult terrain. How did ancient engineers select stones from the quarry that would fit perfectly in walls they were building miles away? The logistics of coordinating quarrying and construction across such distances boggles the mind. Even more puzzling is how the Inca achieved such precise cuts in extremely hard stone using only bronze tools. Andesite, one of the primary stones used in construction, is nearly as hard as granite. Shaping such material into complex curves and angles with bronze chisels would have required incredible amounts of time and labor. Some of the stones show evidence of being carved to match neighboring blocks that were already in place, requiring sculptors to work in tight spaces with perfect precision. The 3-dimensional puzzle aspect of the construction adds another layer of complexity. Unlike modern construction, where blocks are typically rectangular and stack in regular patterns, the Sacsayhuamán stones are all different shapes. Each one was custom carved to fit in a specific location. This means the builders had to envision the entire wall structure in advance and plan how hundreds of uniquely shaped stones would fit together. Some researchers have proposed that the Inca possessed advanced knowledge of stoneworking that has been lost to time. They point to evidence that some stones may have been softened or shaped using chemical processes unknown to modern archaeology. Local legends speak of plants that could soften stone, allowing it to be molded like clay before hardening again. While no scientific evidence supports these claims, they reflect the difficulty of explaining the construction using conventional techniques. The earthquake resistance of the walls provides another clue to their sophisticated engineering. Cusco sits in a highly active seismic zone, and the city has been hit by numerous devastating earthquakes over the centuries. Modern buildings often collapse, but the Sacsayhuamán Walls remain standing. Their interlocking design allows them to flex and move during earthquakes without losing their structural integrity, a principle that modern earthquake-resistant construction has only recently adopted. Recent analysis, using ground-penetrating radar, has revealed that the visible walls are just the tip of the iceberg. The foundations extend deep underground, with additional courses of massive stones that provide stability and support. The full extent of the construction may be far larger than what we can see on the surface, representing an even more massive engineering undertaking than previously realized. The purpose of Sacsayhuamán adds yet another dimension to the mystery. While Spanish chronicles describe it as a fortress, its design doesn't match typical military architecture. The walls are built in a zigzag pattern that would actually make defense more difficult by creating blind spots and exposing defenders to crossfire. Some researchers believe it may have been primarily ceremonial, serving as a temple complex or royal residence rather than a military installation. The construction timeline presents its own puzzles. According to Inca oral traditions, Sacsayhuamán took over 70 years to build and required the labor of 20,000 workers. But archaeological evidence suggests the site may be much older than the Inca Empire itself. Some stones show weathering patterns that could indicate much greater age, and the construction techniques don't match other known Inca building methods. Sacsayhuamán remains one of the most impressive examples of ancient engineering ever discovered. It demonstrates capabilities that we can barely match today, using techniques that we don't fully understand. The fortress stands as a monument to human ingenuity and a reminder that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge and skills that continue to amaze us centuries later. The Black Sarcophagus of Alexandria. In 2018, construction workers in Alexandria, Egypt made a discovery that would capture worldwide attention and spark intense debate. Deep beneath the modern city, they uncovered a massive black granite sarcophagus, the largest ever found in Alexandria, measuring 9 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 6 feet tall. The sarcophagus weighed over 30 tons and was sealed with mortar that appeared undisturbed for over 2,000 years. Its sheer size and the quality of the black granite suggested it belonged to someone extremely important, possibly even Alexander the Great himself, whose tomb has never been found. But here's where the mystery deepens. When archaeologists finally opened the ancient coffin, they didn't find a pristine mummy or golden treasures. Instead, they discovered 3 skeletons floating in a reddish-brown liquid that filled the bottom of the sarcophagus. The liquid wasn't some mystical preservation fluid as some had hoped. It was sewage water that had leaked in through a crack in the stone. But the real questions began when scientists examined the skeletons themselves. One of the 3 individuals had suffered a significant head injury, a hole in the skull that appeared to be from an arrow or similar projectile. This person had survived the injury long enough for some healing to occur, suggesting they lived for weeks or months after being wounded. The other 2 skeletons showed signs of having lived hard lives, with evidence of physical stress and possible combat injuries. These weren't the remains of royalty or high priests, as the elaborate sarcophagus suggested. They appeared to be warriors or soldiers. So why were 3 apparently common soldiers buried in such an expensive and elaborate sarcophagus? The black granite alone would have cost a fortune, and the craftsmanship was exceptional. In ancient Egypt, only the most important individuals received such treatment. Some researchers suggest the soldiers might have been heroes who died defending Alexandria. Others propose they could have been gladiators who achieved great fame. A more intriguing theory suggests they might have been the personal bodyguards of someone extremely important, perhaps even Alexander the Great himself. But here's what makes this mystery even stranger. The sarcophagus was found in an area of Alexandria that wasn't typically used for burials. It was in what would have been a residential or commercial district. Why would such an elaborate tomb be placed there? DNA analysis of the remains has provided some clues, but has also raised new questions. The three individuals weren't related to each other, and their genetic makeup suggests they came from different parts of the Mediterranean world. One might have been local to Egypt, another possibly from Asia Minor, and the third from somewhere in the Greek islands. The dating of the sarcophagus places it in the Ptolemaic period, roughly 300 to 100 BCE. This was a time of great political upheaval in Egypt, with constant warfare between rival claimants to the throne. It's possible these three men died in one of these conflicts and were honored for their service. But the most puzzling aspect remains. Why use such an expensive sarcophagus for what appear to be common soldiers? In ancient Egypt, the cost of such a burial would have been equivalent to millions of dollars today. Someone with tremendous wealth and influence wanted these three men to be remembered and honored for eternity. The black sarcophagus of Alexandria continues to guard its secrets. While we know who wasn't inside, it wasn't Alexander the Great or any other famous historical figure, we still don't know why three seemingly ordinary men received such extraordinary treatment. Their story, whatever it was, must have been remarkable enough to warrant one of the most elaborate burials ever discovered in Alexandria. The mystery serves as a reminder that history is full of unsung heroes whose stories have been lost to time, leaving us only tantalizing clues about their lives and the reasons they were considered worthy of such honor. The vanishing of the Clovis people. Around 13,000 years ago, North America was home to a sophisticated people known today as the Clovis culture. They were master toolmakers, creating distinctive spear points that were both beautiful and deadly effective. These points have been found across the continent, from Alaska to Mexico, suggesting the Clovis people had spread far and wide across the Americas. For generations, archaeologists believe the Clovis were the first people to arrive in North America, crossing the Bering Land Bridge from Asia during the last ice age. Their distinctive tools represented the beginning of human civilization in the New World. But then, around 12,800 years ago, something happened that changed everything. The Clovis people simply vanished. What makes this disappearance so mysterious isn't just that they vanished, it's how completely they vanished, and what happened to the world around them at the same time. The end of the Clovis period coincides with one of the most dramatic environmental changes in North American history. Within a very short time, perhaps just a few decades, the climate shifted dramatically. Temperatures dropped, and much of North America entered a period now known as the Younger Dryas, a return to near Ice Age conditions that lasted over 1,000 years. But the climate change wasn't the only dramatic shift. At exactly the same time, the Clovis people disappeared. North America experienced a mass extinction event. 35 species of large mammals went extinct, including mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, American horses, and camels. These were animals that had survived multiple ice ages over millions of years, yet they all died out within a very short period. Scientists have proposed several theories for what happened, but none fully explain the complete picture. The climate change theory suggests that the returning cold killed off the large animals that the Clovis people depended on for food. Without their primary food source, the Clovis culture collapsed. But there are problems with this theory. The Clovis people were highly adaptable. They had successfully spread across an entire continent and had survived previous climate changes. Why couldn't they adapt to this one? Another theory proposes that the Clovis people themselves caused the extinction by overhunting the large mammals. Known as the overkill hypothesis, this idea suggests that human hunters, new to the continent, killed off species that hadn't evolved to fear humans. However, this theory also has significant problems. Archaeological evidence suggests the Clovis people were actually quite conservative in their hunting practices. They seem to have primarily hunted mammoths and mastodons, and there's little evidence they were responsible for the extinction of the other 30-plus species that died out. A more recent and controversial theory suggests that North America was struck by a cosmic impact, either a comet or asteroid, around 12,800 years ago. Proponents of this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis point to a layer of sediment found at dozens of sites across North America that contains unusual materials. This layer, which dates to exactly the time of the Clovis disappearance, contains high concentrations of platinum, microscopic diamonds, and spherules that appear to have been created by extremely high temperatures. Some researchers interpret this as evidence of a cosmic impact that caused massive wildfires, climate change, and the extinction of both the megafauna and the Clovis people. The impact theory is highly debated. Critics argue that the evidence is inconsistent and that the materials found in the sediment layer could have other explanations. However, supporters continue to find new evidence, including impact craters that might date to the right time period. But here's what makes the Clovis mystery even more intriguing. They didn't just vanish without a trace. The archaeological record shows that after the Clovis period, North America was repopulated by people with different technologies and different ways of life. These later peoples, known as Folsom and other cultures, made different tools and seemed to have different hunting strategies. Were these later peoples descendants of the Clovis who adapted to the new conditions? Were they entirely new groups of people who arrived from Asia after the Clovis disappeared? Or were they survivors from other pre-Clovis populations that had been living in North America alongside the Clovis? Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that people were living in the Americas before the Clovis period. Sites like Monte Verde in Chile and Paisley Cave in Oregon contain evidence of human occupation thousands of years before the Clovis appeared. This means the Clovis weren't the first Americans after all. They were just one group among many. This discovery makes the Clovis disappearance even more puzzling. If there were other people living in the Americas at the same time, why did the Clovis vanish while others survived? What was different about the Clovis people, or their way of life, that made them more vulnerable to whatever catastrophe struck North America 12,800 years ago? The Clovis mystery remains unsolved. Whether they disappeared due to climate change, cosmic impact, ecological collapse, or some combination of factors, their vanishing marks one of the most dramatic cultural transitions in human history. They were the first widespread culture in the Americas, and their disappearance opened the way for the diverse array of Native American cultures that followed. The stone spheres of Costa Rica. Hidden in the jungles and river valleys of Costa Rica lie some of the most perfect and mysterious artifacts ever discovered. Hundreds of stone spheres, carved with such precision that they continue to baffle archaeologists and engineers today. These aren't small decorative objects. The largest of these spheres weighs over 15 tons and measures more than 6 feet in diameter. They were carved from granodiorite, one of the hardest stones available, and many are so perfectly round that they vary from a true sphere by only millimeters. The spheres were first brought to international attention in the 1932 when the United Fruit Company was clearing land for banana plantations. Workers discovered the mysterious orbs scattered throughout the Diquis Delta region of southern Costa Rica. Some were partially buried, others were sitting on the surface, and many were arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Local legends claimed the spheres were made by the god of thunder and lightning, who used them as weapons against the wind god. According to these stories, the spheres could be moved by magical potions made from plants, but the scientific reality of how they were created is almost as mysterious as the legends. The precision of these spheres is what makes them truly remarkable. Modern analysis has revealed that many are perfect spheres within a tolerance that would be difficult to achieve even with today's technology. The largest spheres, weighing many tons, show no evidence of the kinds of marks or imperfections you would expect from ancient carving tools. How did pre-Columbian peoples, working without metal tools, create such perfect spheres from some of the hardest stone available? The process would have required not just incredible skill, but also sophisticated knowledge of mathematics and engineering. To create a perfect sphere, the carvers would have needed to maintain a constant radius from a central point while working around the entire surface. This is extraordinarily difficult, even with modern measuring tools. Yet somehow, ancient craftspeople achieved this level of precision using only stone tools. Various theories have been proposed for how they were made. Some suggest the spheres were rough carved and then rolled in sand or other abrasive materials to wear them into perfect shapes. Others propose they were carved using a system of measuring strings radiating from a central point. Still others suggest they were heated and cooled in a controlled way to cause the stone to fracture in predictable patterns. But none of these theories fully explains how the ancients achieved such precision, and experimental archaeology has failed to recreate spheres of similar quality using proposed ancient techniques. The purpose of the spheres is equally mysterious. They were clearly important to the Dike's culture that created them, as evidenced by the effort required to make them and the careful arrangements in which they were placed. But what were they for? Some spheres were found arranged in straight lines, others in triangular patterns, and still others in complex geometric configurations. A few were found at the tops of hills or other prominent locations, suggesting they might have had ceremonial or astronomical significance. One intriguing theory suggests the arrangements of spheres might represent constellations or astronomical alignments. The Dike's people were sophisticated enough to create these perfect spheres, so they might also have been advanced astronomers. However, no clear stellar correlations have been definitively established. Another theory proposes that the spheres marked important locations or boundaries. Their placement might have indicated territorial limits, trade routes, or sacred sites. The largest and most perfect spheres might have marked the most important locations. The spheres might also have had a more practical purpose. Some researchers suggest they could have been used as markers for navigation, either overland or along rivers. Their perfect roundness would have made them easily recognizable landmarks from great distances. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Costa Rican spheres is their distribution. While most are found in the Dike's Delta, others have been discovered in different parts of Costa Rica and even in neighboring countries. This suggests either that the sphere-making knowledge spread widely, or that the spheres themselves were traded or transported over long distances. The dating of the spheres has proven challenging because stone doesn't contain organic material that can be carbon dated. However, based on the archaeological contexts in which they've been found, most appear to have been created between 600 and 1000 CE, during the height of the Dike's culture. Unfortunately, many of the spheres have been damaged or destroyed since their discovery. Some were dynamited by treasure hunters who believed they contained gold. Others were moved from their original positions to decorate parks and government buildings, destroying valuable archaeological context. Today, only a fraction of the original spheres remain in their original positions, making it increasingly difficult for archaeologists to understand their original purpose and meaning. The surviving spheres have been recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, but many questions remain unanswered. The stone spheres of Costa Rica represent one of the most impressive achievements of pre-Columbian engineering and artistry in the Americas. They demonstrate that ancient peoples possess sophisticated knowledge and skills that we're only beginning to appreciate. Yet their purpose remains as mysterious today as when they were first discovered nearly a century ago. The 7 Pagodas of Mahabalipuram. On the southeastern coast of India, in the town of Mahabalipuram, stands one of the most beautiful examples of ancient rock-cut architecture in the world, the Shore Temple. But local legends have always insisted that this 7th century masterpiece wasn't alone. According to these stories, 6 other magnificent temples once stood alongside it, creating a complex known as the 7 Pagodas of Mahabalipuram. For centuries, these legends were dismissed as folklore. The Shore Temple was impressive enough on its own. Why embellish the story with tales of lost temples beneath the waves? But then the Indian Ocean tsunami of the 26th of December, 2004, changed everything. As the massive waves receded from the coast at Mahabalipuram, they revealed something extraordinary. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the outlines of submerged structures became visible on the seafloor. Local fishermen and tourists reported seeing walls, carved pillars, and what appeared to be the foundations of large buildings beneath the water. The tsunami had essentially acted as a giant archaeological excavation, washing away centuries of sand and sediment that had hidden these structures. Marine archaeologists rushed to investigate, and what they found confirmed what the local legends had maintained all along. There really were temples beneath the waves. Underwater surveys revealed the remains of at least 2 major temple complexes submerged in about 6 feet of water just off the shore. These weren't simple structures that had been washed into the sea. They were sophisticated stone temples with carved walls, decorated pillars, and complex architectural features. The quality of the carving matched that of the surviving Shore Temple, suggesting they were built by the same skilled craftspeople. But how did these temples end up underwater? The answer reveals a fascinating chapter in both geological and human history. The temples were built during the reign of the Pallava dynasty in the 7th and 8th centuries CE. At that time, sea levels were significantly lower than they are today. What is now underwater would have been dry land, perfect for building a complex of temples. The Pallava kings were great patrons of art and architecture. They commissioned not just the Shore Temple, but an entire complex of rock-cut temples and sculptures throughout the region. Mahabalipuram became a major center of art, culture, and trade, attracting visitors from across the Indian Ocean. The 7 temples would have created an impressive sight for ships arriving at this important port. Sailors approaching the coast would have seen a line of magnificent towers rising from the shoreline, each one a masterpiece of stone carving. The temples served both as places of worship and as symbols of the Pallava kingdom's power and sophistication. But then the sea began to rise. This wasn't a sudden catastrophic flood, but a gradual process that took place over several centuries. As global temperatures warmed after the medieval cold period, ice sheets melted and sea levels rose. The temples closest to the water were the first to be affected. Historical accounts from the medieval period describe how the temples were gradually abandoned as the sea encroached. Some sources mention attempts to build seawalls to protect the structures, but these efforts ultimately failed. One by one, the temples were swallowed by the advancing waters. The process wasn't uniform. The Shore Temple survived because it was built on slightly higher ground and because later rulers invested in protecting it with seawalls. But 6 of its sister temples weren't so fortunate. They disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only the legends to remember them. Recent archaeological investigations have revealed that the submerged temples are remarkably well preserved. The same waters that claimed them have also protected them from weathering and human destruction. Underwater cameras have captured detailed images of carved elephant sculptures, intricate relief work, and architectural features that are as crisp as the day they were carved. The discovery has revolutionized our understanding of ancient Indian architecture and urban planning. It appears that the Pallava rulers didn't just build random temples along the coast. They created a carefully planned complex that would have rivaled any ancient city in its grandeur and sophistication. But the sunken temples of Mahabalipuram have also raised new questions. If sea levels were low enough in the 7th and 8th centuries for these temples to be built on dry land, what does this tell us about historical climate change? The temples provide a unique record of how sea levels have changed over the past 1,400 years. Scientists studying the site have found evidence that sea levels in this region have risen by at least 6 to 8 feet since the temples were built. This information is crucial for understanding both historical climate patterns and predicting future sea level changes. The temples also challenge our assumptions about ancient peoples' understanding of environmental change. Did the Pallava builders realize that sea levels might rise? Some architectural features of the shore temple suggest they might have anticipated flooding and built accordingly. More intriguingly, some researchers have suggested that the submergence of the temples might not have been entirely due to rising seas. Geological evidence indicates that this part of the Indian coast is also slowly sinking due to tectonic activity. The combination of rising seas and sinking land would have made the flooding of the temples almost inevitable. Today, the 7 pagodas of Mahabalipuram represent one of the world's most important underwater archaeological sites. The surviving shore temple has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and efforts are underway to study and protect the submerged temples as well. The site serves as a powerful reminder of how environmental changes can erase even the most magnificent human achievements. But it also demonstrates the value of oral traditions and local knowledge. The legends of the 7 pagodas, passed down through generations of local people, preserved the memory of these lost temples long after they had vanished beneath the waves. The lost civilization of Doggerland. Beneath the cold grey waters of the North Sea lies one of Europe's greatest archaeological mysteries, Doggerland, a vast landmass that once connected Britain to continental Europe. This lost world, sometimes called Europe's Atlantis, was home to thousands of people for over 5,000 years before rising seas claimed it forever. Today, if you fly over the North Sea between Britain and the Netherlands, you see only water. But 20,000 years ago, during the last ice age, this area was dry land, a vast plain bigger than many modern European countries. As the ice sheets melted and sea levels rose, this ancient landscape was gradually swallowed by the sea, taking with it one of Europe's oldest civilizations. The story of Doggerland began to emerge in the early 20th century, not through careful archaeological excavation, but through the nets of North Sea fishermen. For decades, fishing boats had been hauling up strange artifacts from the seafloor: stone tools, mammoth bones, and pieces of worked antler. These finds were often dismissed as curiosities, but they were actually evidence of a lost world. The breakthrough came when archaeologists began to study these fishing artifacts more carefully. They realized that the stone tools were made using techniques that were thousands of years old. The mammoth bones showed cut marks from human butchering. Most intriguingly, some of the antler pieces had been carved into tools and weapons with sophisticated designs. Using data from oil exploration and advanced sonar mapping, researchers have been able to reconstruct what Doggerland looked like during its heyday. It was a diverse landscape of rivers, lakes, forests, and grasslands. The climate was mild and wet, perfect for supporting both large herds of animals and the human populations that hunted them. The centerpiece of Doggerland was a massive river system that drained much of northern Europe. This ancient river, larger than any modern European river, collected water from what is now the Thames, Rhine, and numerous other waterways. The river valley would have been a natural highway for both animals and humans. facilitating trade and migration across the continent. Archaeological evidence suggests that Doggerland wasn't just a bridge between Britain and Europe. It was a thriving homeland in its own right. The people who lived there developed sophisticated technologies for hunting, fishing, and tool-making. They carved elaborate decorations into bone and antler, suggesting a rich artistic and spiritual culture. But perhaps most remarkably, the Doggerland people seem to have been among Europe's first seafarers. Artifacts found on the seafloor include sophisticated fishing tools and what appear to be parts of boats. This makes sense. As sea levels gradually rose, the inhabitants of Doggerland would have had to become increasingly skilled at dealing with water. The end of Doggerland wasn't a sudden catastrophe, but a slow-motion disaster that played out over thousands of years. As the climate warmed after the last ice age, melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise at an average rate of about 1 meter per century. This might not sound like much, but on the flat plain of Doggerland, each meter of sea level rise meant the loss of thousands of square kilometers of land. The Doggerland people would have faced a constant retreat inland. Communities that had been established for generations would have been forced to abandon their homes as the sea advanced. Archaeological evidence suggests this process continued for about 5,000 years, from roughly 10,000 to 5,000 BCE. But the final end of Doggerland may have been much more dramatic. Around 6,200 BCE, there's evidence of a massive tsunami that swept across the North Sea. This wave was caused by an underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, which displaced an enormous volume of water. The tsunami would have been devastating for any remaining communities in Doggerland. Waves up to 20 feet high would have swept across the low-lying landscape, destroying settlements and possibly drowning thousands of people. This catastrophe may have marked the final end of continuous human habitation in Doggerland. However, some researchers believe that small islands and high ground in Doggerland remained above water for several more centuries. These remnant lands might have served as refuges for survivors, supporting small communities of people who preserved some of the ancient Doggerland culture. The story of Doggerland has important implications for our understanding of European prehistory. For thousands of years, this landmass served as a crucial link between Britain and the continent, allowing the free movement of people, animals, and ideas. When it was finally submerged, Britain became an island, and its history diverged from that of continental Europe. Modern research into Doggerland has been revolutionized by new technologies. Advanced sonar systems can create detailed maps of the sea floor, revealing ancient river channels, lakes, and even possible settlement sites. Sediment cores from the North Sea contain pollen, seeds, and other organic materials that provide insights into the ancient environment. Most exciting of all, marine archaeologists are now beginning to excavate actual settlement sites beneath the North Sea. These underwater excavations are incredibly challenging, but they're revealing unprecedented details about how the Doggerland people lived. Recent finds include the remains of wooden structures that might be parts of houses or fish traps, sophisticated stone tools, and even footprints preserved in ancient mud. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of this lost civilization. The study of Doggerland also provides valuable lessons for understanding modern climate change. The gradual submergence of this vast landmass shows how even relatively small changes in sea level can have enormous impacts on human populations. As modern sea levels continue to rise, low-lying areas around the world face the same fate that befell Doggerland thousands of years ago. Perhaps most poignantly, the story of Doggerland reminds us how much of our past lies hidden beneath the waves. This lost land was home to thousands of generations of our ancestors, yet we're only now beginning to understand their story. Doggerland represents not just a geographical feature, but a chapter of human history that was literally erased from the map by the rising seas. The Maine Penny, the Viking artifact that shouldn't exist. In 1957, an amateur archaeologist named Guy Melgren was excavating a Native American site at Goddard Point in Maine when he made a discovery that would puzzle experts for decades. Among the typical artifacts you'd expect to find at such a site, pottery shards, stone tools, and shell fragments, he uncovered something that simply didn't belong. A small silver coin that had been minted over 1,000 miles away in medieval Norway. The coin, which became known as the Maine Penny, is a genuine Norse artifact dating to the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, who ruled Norway from 1067 to 1093 CE. On one side, it bears the inscription Olaf Rex, King Olaf, and on the other, a cross and additional Norse text. There's no question about its authenticity. It's definitely a real medieval Norwegian coin. But here's the mystery. How did a Norse coin end up at a Native American archaeological site in Maine, hundreds of years before Columbus supposedly discovered America? The obvious answer might seem to be that Vikings had reached Maine during their explorations of North America around 1000 CE. We know that Norse explorers, led by Leif Erikson and others, established a settlement at Lansor Meadows in Newfoundland. Perhaps they travelled further south along the American coast than previously thought. However, the Maine Penny presents several puzzles that make this simple explanation problematic. First, the coin dates to the late 11th century, which is after the known period of Viking exploration in North America. The Norse settlement at Lansor Meadows was abandoned around 1020 CE, nearly 50 years before this coin was even minted. Second, the archaeological context is strange. The coin was found among artifacts from the woodland period of Native American culture, which in this region dates from about 1000 BCE to 1600 CE. The specific layer where the coin was discovered contained other artifacts that have been dated to around 1180 to 1235 CE, roughly 100 to 150 years after the coin was minted. This time gap raises questions about how and when the coin arrived at the site. Did a Viking drop it there sometime between 1067 and 1093 CE, only to have it worked its way down into a later archaeological layer? Or did it arrive at the site much later, perhaps through trade networks? The trade network theory is actually quite plausible. Native American tribes maintained extensive trade relationships that spanned vast distances. Goods regularly traveled from the Pacific Northwest to the Atlantic coast and from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico. It's entirely possible that the Maine Penny made its way south through these trade networks. But if the coin came through Native American trade networks, where did those traders get it? The most likely source would be the Norse settlements in Greenland, which maintained contact with Europe and continued to receive supplies and goods from Norway well into the medieval period. Archaeological evidence suggests that Native Americans in the Arctic regions of Canada had contact with Norse settlers in Greenland. Inuit peoples traded with the Norse, exchanging Arctic products like walrus ivory and polar bear furs for European goods, including iron tools and, possibly, coins. The Maine Penny could have started its journey in Norway, travelled to Greenland with Norse settlers or traders, been traded to Inuit peoples, and then passed through multiple Native American trade networks until it finally reached Maine. This would explain both how a Norse coin ended up in North America and why it was found in a context that dates to long after the known period of Viking exploration. However, this theory raises its own questions. Why would Native Americans want to trade for a silver coin? In most Native American cultures of this period, precious metals had little intrinsic value. They were sometimes used for decorative purposes, but they weren't considered currency in the way Europeans understood it. It's possible that the coin was valued not for its silver content, but as an exotic curiosity or as a raw material for making other objects. Native American craftspeople were skilled at working metals when they had access to them, and they might have seen the coin as a source of silver for making jewelry or decorative objects. Another theory suggests that the coin might have been lost by a much later European visitor to the site. French explorers and traders were active in Maine during the 16th and 17th centuries, and it's conceivable that one of them carried the ancient coin as a curiosity or good luck charm. However, this theory has problems too. By the 16th century, an 11th century Norwegian coin would have been extremely rare and valuable. It seems unlikely that anyone would carry such an artifact casually or risk losing it in the Maine wilderness. The mystery deepened when researchers tried to find other Norse artifacts at the Goddard Point site. Despite extensive additional excavation, no other Viking Age objects have ever been found there. If Vikings had visited the site, wouldn't they have left behind other traces of their presence? Some skeptics have suggested that the Maine Penny might be a hoax, that someone deliberately planted it at the archaeological site to create a sensation. However, Guy Melgren, the discoverer, was a respected amateur archaeologist with no apparent motive for fraud. Moreover, the coin was found during a systematic excavation, not during a casual treasure hunt. The Maine Penny has been extensively studied and tested. Its authenticity as a genuine 11th century Norwegian coin has never been questioned. Chemical analysis has confirmed that it was made from silver that matches Norwegian sources from that period. Wear patterns on the coin are consistent with it having been in circulation for some time before being lost or discarded. Today, the Maine Penny is housed at the Maine State Museum, where it continues to intrigue visitors and researchers. It remains the only confirmed Viking Age artifact found in the United States outside of Lanzac Meadows. The coin serves as a tantalizing hint that our understanding of pre-Columbian contact between Europe and North America may be incomplete. Whether it arrived through direct Viking exploration, through complex trade networks, or through some other means we haven't considered, the Maine Penny proves that connections between the Old and New worlds existed centuries before Columbus. Perhaps most importantly, the Maine Penny reminds us that history is full of surprises. The lost city of Aztlan. According to Aztec legend, their ancestors once lived in a paradise called Aztlan, the place of herons. This mythical homeland was described as an island surrounded by water, where the Aztec people lived in harmony before beginning their great migration south to establish their empire in central Mexico. For centuries, scholars dismissed Aztlan as pure mythology, a creation story with no basis in historical fact. But recent archaeological discoveries have suggested that this legendary homeland might have been a real place after all. The story of Aztlan comes from Aztec historical accounts, particularly the Codex Boturini and other pictographic documents created after the Spanish conquest. According to these sources, the Aztecs, who called themselves the Mexica, originally lived on an island in a large lake far to the north of their eventual capital, Tenochtitlan. The Aztec accounts describe Aztlan as a place of abundance, where food was plentiful and life was easy. The people lived in peace, worshipping their patron deity, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the Sunday. But then, according to the legend, Huitzilopochtli commanded his people to leave their comfortable homeland and journey south to find a new home. The migration from Aztlan wasn't just a simple move. The Aztec accounts describe it as an epic journey that took many generations. The migrating people faced numerous hardships, including conflicts with other tribes, periods of starvation, and the challenge of finding suitable places to settle temporarily along the way. The journey finally ended when the Aztecs reached the Valley of Mexico and saw the prophetic sign their god had promised them: an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. This sign appeared on an island in Lake Texcoco, where they founded their capital city, Tenochtitlan, in 1325 CE. For modern scholars, the story of Aztlan presented several problems. First, the accounts were written down after the Spanish conquest, long after the events they described. Second, they mixed obvious mythological elements with what appeared to be historical information, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Most problematically, the Aztec accounts provided few specific details about Aztlan's location. They indicated it was somewhere to the north or northwest of central Mexico, but they didn't give distances or geographical landmarks that could help pinpoint its location. However, in recent decades, archaeologists have made discoveries that suggest the Aztlan story might contain more historical truth than previously believed. The key has been understanding that migration stories, even when they contain mythological elements, often preserve genuine historical memories. Archaeological evidence now shows that there was indeed a major population movement from northern Mexico into the Valley of Mexico during the centuries before the founding of Tenochtitlan. Genetic studies of modern indigenous populations support this, showing connections between groups in northern Mexico and the descendants of the Aztecs. But where exactly was Aztlan? Various theories have been proposed, each based on different interpretations of the historical accounts and archaeological evidence. One of the most compelling theories places Aztlan in the region around Lake Chapala in Jalisco, Mexico. This area has several features that match the Aztec descriptions. It's built around a large lake, has islands that could have supported settlements, and lies in the general direction indicated by the migration accounts. Archaeological excavations in the Lake Chapala region have uncovered evidence of sophisticated pre-Columbian settlements that flourished during the right time period. These sites show cultural connections to later Aztec practices, including similar pottery styles and religious symbols. Another theory suggests that Aztlan was located much further north, possibly in the southwestern United States. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that many indigenous groups in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah have oral traditions about ancestors who migrated south into Mexico. The Hopi people of Arizona, for example, have migration stories that describe their ancestors traveling south and eventually reaching central Mexico. Some researchers have suggested that these stories and the Aztec accounts of Aztlan might be describing the same historical events from different perspectives. A more controversial theory places Aztlan in an island that no longer exists. According to this idea, Aztlan was located on an island in a large lake that was later drained or that disappeared due to climate change. Several lakes in northern Mexico have changed dramatically in size over the past 1,000 years, due to both natural climate variations and human activity. Recent archaeological work has focused on trying to trace the actual route of the Aztec migration. Researchers have identified a series of sites between northern Mexico and the Valley of Mexico that show evidence of temporary settlements by migrating populations. These sites contain pottery and tools that show a gradual transition from northern Mexican styles to what would become classic Aztec culture. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence comes from the city of Teotihuacan, which was already ancient when the Aztecs arrived in central Mexico. Teotihuacan contains murals and sculptures that some researchers interpret as depicting the arrival of northern peoples. These images show groups of people carrying bundles and weapons, apparently arriving from somewhere else. The mystery of Aztlan has been complicated by political and cultural factors. During the Chicano movement of the 1962nd and 1972nd, Aztlan became a powerful symbol of indigenous identity and resistance to European colonization. Some activists claim that Aztlan was located in the southwestern United States, and that this gave Mexican Americans a historical claim to lands that had been taken by the United States. While these political interpretations have added passion to the debate about Aztlan, they've also sometimes obscured the archaeological and historical evidence. Researchers must carefully separate political claims from scientific investigation. Recent advances in DNA analysis have provided new tools for understanding ancient migrations. Studies of modern indigenous populations show clear genetic connections between groups in northern Mexico and central Mexico, supporting the idea that there was indeed a major population movement from north to south. However, the genetic evidence also shows that the situation was more complex than the simple migration story suggests. Rather than a single group moving from one place to another, the evidence points to multiple migrations and extensive mixing between different populations over many centuries. The search for Aztlan continues today, using increasingly sophisticated tools and methods. Satellite imagery allows researchers to identify potential archaeological sites across vast areas. Ground-penetrating radar can detect buried structures without excavation, and advanced dating techniques can establish precise chronologies for ancient settlements. But perhaps the most important development has been a growing recognition that indigenous oral traditions often contain valuable historical information. Rather than dismissing stories like the Aztlan migration as pure mythology, researchers are learning to extract historical kernels from these accounts. The quest for Aztlan represents more than just an archaeological puzzle. It's a search for the origins of one of the world's great civilizations. Understanding where the Aztecs came from helps us understand how they became the powerful empire that dominated central Mexico for centuries. Whether Aztlan was a real place or a symbolic representation of the Aztec people's origins, the search for it has already yielded valuable insights into the complex history of migration and cultural development in ancient Mexico. And who knows, perhaps one day archaeologists will uncover the remains of a great city on an island in a northern lake, finally solving the mystery of the Aztecs' legendary homeland. Roman dodecahedrons, ancient objects with no explanation. Scattered across Europe, from Britain to Hungary, archaeologists have discovered over 100 mysterious bronze objects that have puzzled researchers for more than 250 years. These artifacts, known as Roman dodecahedrons, are 12-sided geometric shapes, roughly the size of a baseball, covered with circular holes of varying sizes. Despite decades of study and speculation, no one has been able to definitively explain what they were used for. The dodecahedrons date to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, during the height of the Roman Empire. They've been found primarily in Gaul, modern France, Britain, and Germanic regions along the Rhine, areas that were on the northern frontier of Roman territory. Curiously, very few have been found in the Mediterranean heartland of the empire, including Rome itself. Each dodecahedron is unique in its details, but they all share certain characteristics. They're made of bronze, have 12 pentagonal faces, and each face contains a circular hole. The holes vary in size, both between different dodecahedrons and on the same object. Small knobs or projections appear at the corners where the faces meet, and many show signs of careful craftsmanship and finishing. The mystery begins with the fact that Roman dodecahedrons are never mentioned in any ancient texts. The Romans were meticulous record keepers who wrote about everything from military tactics to cooking recipes, yet they left no written description of these objects or their purpose. This is particularly strange, given that the dodecahedrons required considerable skill and expense to create. The bronze used to make them was valuable, and the geometric precision required to create a proper dodecahedron was sophisticated for its time. Someone invested significant resources in making these objects, yet apparently felt no need to document what they were for. Over the years, researchers have proposed dozens of theories about the dodecahedron's purpose. Some of the most common suggestions include: they might have been surveying instruments used by Roman engineers and architects. The holes could have been used to sight distant objects or to measure angles and distances. This would explain why they're found primarily in frontier regions, where the Romans were building new roads, fortifications, and cities. Another theory suggests they were used for astronomical observations. The holes could have been aligned with stars or planets to track celestial movements. Ancient peoples were sophisticated astronomers, and the Romans certainly had the mathematical knowledge to create complex astronomical instruments. Some researchers have proposed that the dodecahedrons were used for calculating optimal planting dates for crops. The holes might have been used to track the sun's position throughout the year, helping farmers know when to plant and harvest. This agricultural calendar theory is appealing because it would explain why the objects are found in rural frontier areas. A more esoteric theory suggests they were used for religious or mystical purposes. In ancient philosophy, the dodecahedron was associated with the cosmos and the divine. Plato described it as the shape used by the gods to arrange the constellations. Perhaps the Roman dodecahedrons were used in religious ceremonies or for divination. Some practical theories have also been proposed. The dodecahedrons might have been used as candle holders, with the holes allowing air circulation to keep flames burning properly. They could have been used to determine the optimal size for military tent stakes or arrow shafts. Some even suggest they were simply toys or decorative objects. Experimental archaeology has attempted to test some of these theories. Researchers have tried using replica dodecahedrons as surveying instruments, astronomical tools, and measuring devices. While some of these experiments have shown that the objects could potentially serve these purposes, none have provided conclusive proof. One of the most intriguing aspects of the dodecahedrons is their distribution pattern. They're found almost exclusively in areas that were Celtic before Roman conquest. This has led some researchers to suggest that they might actually be Celtic inventions that were adopted by the Romans, rather than Roman inventions distributed to the provinces. Celtic druids were known for their sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics. They might have created the dodecahedrons for purposes that made sense within their cultural context, but were later forgotten as Roman culture displaced Celtic traditions. The fact that the dodecahedrons disappear from the archaeological record around the 3rd century CE supports this theory. This was a time of great upheaval in the Roman Empire, with invasions, civil wars, and economic collapse. Many traditions and practices were lost during this period, possibly including whatever purpose the dodecahedrons served. Modern analysis has revealed interesting details about how the dodecahedrons were made. They were cast using sophisticated bronze-working techniques, requiring considerable skill and experience. The geometric precision needed to create proper pentagonal faces would have required mathematical knowledge and careful planning. Some dodecahedrons show signs of wear, suggesting they were used regularly rather than just kept as decorative objects. Others appear to have been deliberately placed in graves or ritual deposits, indicating they had special significance for their owners. The mystery has been complicated by the fact that similar objects appear in different time periods and cultures. Icosahedral dice from ancient Egypt show that geometric shapes were used for various purposes in the ancient world. Medieval Islamic mathematicians created complex geometric objects for both practical and theoretical purposes. Recent discoveries have added new pieces to the puzzle. In 2023, metal detector enthusiasts found a dodecahedron in Belgium that was larger and more elaborate than previous finds. This discovery prompted new excavations that revealed additional artifacts in the same area, but still no clear indication of purpose. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the Roman dodecahedron mystery is that the answer might have been common knowledge to ancient people. These objects might have served an obvious everyday purpose that was so well understood that no one bothered to write it down. It's only because that knowledge was lost that we find them mysterious today. The Roman dodecahedrons remain one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles. They represent sophisticated engineering and mathematical knowledge. They were clearly important enough to justify significant investment in their creation, and they were used widely across the northern Roman Empire. Yet their purpose remains as mysterious today as when the first one was discovered centuries ago. The Lost Labyrinth of Egypt. Ancient historians wrote about a structure in Egypt that they considered more impressive than the pyramids themselves. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, described it as surpassing even the greatest wonders of Greece. Pliny the Elder called it the most remarkable building ever constructed. Yet today, this legendary structure, the Lost Labyrinth of Egypt, has virtually disappeared, leaving behind only scattered ruins and one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The labyrinth was supposedly located near the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis, close to the pyramid complex at Hawara in the Fayum region. Ancient sources described it as a massive underground complex containing thousands of rooms, intricate passageways, and chambers filled with hieroglyphic inscriptions that chronicled the entire history of Egypt. According to Herodotus, who claimed to have visited the labyrinth in the 5th century BCE, the structure was divided into two main sections, an underground portion that was forbidden to visitors, and an upper level that was open to the public. Even the upper level, he wrote, was so vast and complex that visitors needed guides to avoid getting lost in its countless rooms and corridors. Herodotus described chambers dedicated to each of Egypt's nomes, administrative districts, halls containing the records of every pharaoh, and rooms filled with religious texts and ritual objects. The building was said to contain more rooms than any structure that had ever been built, with passageways so confusing that the complex earned its name from the legendary Labyrinth of Crete. The purpose of this massive structure, according to ancient sources, was to serve as the ultimate repository of Egyptian knowledge and culture. It was supposedly built by the pharaohs of the 12th dynasty, around 1800 BCE, as a place where all of Egypt's wisdom, history, and religious traditions could be preserved for future generations. But here's where the mystery begins. Despite these detailed ancient descriptions, modern archaeologists have been unable to locate the main structure of the labyrinth. This seems almost impossible. How do you lose a building that ancient sources described as larger than all the pyramids combined? The search for the lost labyrinth has been ongoing for over 150 years. In the 19th century, archaeologists identified the pyramid complex at Hawara as the most likely location, based on ancient geographical descriptions. Excavations around the pyramid of Amenemhat III revealed the remains of a large mortuary temple, which some researchers initially thought might be the famous labyrinth. However, the Hawara temple, while impressive, was nowhere near the scale described by ancient historians. The ruins showed evidence of a substantial building with multiple rooms and corridors, but nothing approaching the vast underground complex that Herodotus and others had described. This led to speculation that the main labyrinth might be buried deeper underground, or that it had been completely destroyed by later building projects. The area around Memphis and the Fayum has been continuously inhabited for thousands of years, and many ancient structures have been dismantled for their stone, or built over by later construction. In recent decades, new technologies have been brought to bear on the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the area around Hawara have revealed evidence of extensive underground structures. These surveys show regular geometric patterns beneath the sand that could represent the foundations of a large building complex. Satellite imagery has also revealed interesting features in the landscape around Hawara. Aerial photographs show geometric patterns in the fields and subtle variations in vegetation that might indicate buried structures. Some of these patterns are remarkably regular and extensive, suggesting they could be the remains of a very large ancient building. But the most intriguing recent development came in 2008, when a Belgian-Egyptian team used ground-penetrating radar to survey a large area south of the Hawara pyramid. Their results suggested the presence of a massive rectangular structure buried beneath several meters of sand and debris. The radar images showed what appeared to be a building, measuring roughly 1,000 feet by 800 feet, easily large enough to contain the thousands of rooms described by ancient historians. The structure appeared to have multiple levels and a complex internal layout that could indeed represent a labyrinthine design. However, excavating such a large buried structure presents enormous challenges. The area is now covered by agricultural fields and modern settlements. Any major excavation would require moving massive amounts of earth and would disrupt the livelihoods of local farmers. There's also the question of preservation. If the labyrinth is buried under several meters of sand, it might be well preserved. But exposure to air and moisture could cause rapid deterioration of any organic materials, including papyrus texts that might contain invaluable historical information. Some researchers have suggested that the lost labyrinth might not be a single building at all, but rather a complex of connected structures spread over a large area. Ancient descriptions might have been describing an entire sacred district rather than one massive building. This theory is supported by the fact that the area around Hawara contains numerous other ancient structures. There are several smaller pyramids, temple complexes, and administrative buildings that date to the same general period. Together, these might have formed an integrated complex that ancient visitors experienced as a single overwhelming structure. Another possibility is that the labyrinth was primarily underground from the beginning. Ancient Egypt had a strong tradition of underground burial complexes and subterranean temples. The labyrinth might have been designed as a massive underground necropolis or ritual center, with only small portions visible on the surface. This would explain why modern surface surveys have found relatively little evidence of the structure. Most of the building would have been below ground level from the time it was constructed, making it much harder to locate using conventional archaeological methods. The mystery has been further complicated by the activities of early archaeologists and treasure hunters. The Hawara area was extensively excavated in the 19th and early 20th centuries, often using methods that would be considered destructive by modern standards. It's possible that important evidence of the labyrinth was destroyed or removed during these early investigations. Some researchers have suggested that parts of the labyrinth might have been found but misidentified. Ancient building stones were frequently reused in later construction projects. Elements of the labyrinth might now be incorporated into Islamic monuments, Coptic churches, or even modern buildings in the region. The search for the lost labyrinth continues today, driven by advances in remote sensing technology and non-invasive survey methods. Each new survey reveals additional evidence of buried structures, but the complete picture remains elusive. Whether the lost labyrinth will ever be fully excavated remains an open question. The practical and financial challenges are enormous, and there are legitimate concerns about preserving whatever remains of this ancient wonder. But the mystery continues to inspire archaeologists and historians, representing one of the greatest archaeological prizes still waiting to be claimed. If the labyrinth is ever fully revealed, it could revolutionize our understanding of ancient Egyptian civilization, providing insights into their knowledge, beliefs, and achievements that have been hidden for over 2 millennia. The ruins of Nan Madol, the floating city of the Pacific. On the remote island of Pohnpei, in Micronesia, stands one of the most mysterious and impressive archaeological sites in the Pacific. Nan Madol, an ancient city built entirely on artificial islands. This massive complex of stone structures, connected by a network of canals, has been called the Venice of the Pacific, but its origins and the methods used to build it remain largely unexplained. Nan Madol covers over 200 acres and consists of nearly 100 artificial islands, constructed from massive basalt columns and slabs. These aren't small decorative islands, they're substantial platforms that once supported large buildings, ceremonial centers, and residential complexes. The total weight of stone used in the construction is estimated at over 750,000 tons. What makes Nan Madol truly remarkable is that it was built using megalithic construction techniques in a part of the world where such methods are almost unknown. The builders used basalt columns that weigh several tons each, fitting them together without mortar in a style reminiscent of ancient Mediterranean or South American architecture. The mystery begins with the question of who built Nan Madol and when. Local oral traditions credit its construction to two sorcerer brothers, Olisishpa and Olosopa, who were said to have used magic to move the massive stones. According to these legends, the brothers could make the basalt columns fly through the air and arrange themselves into the desired patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests that Nan Madol was built between 1200 and 1700 CE, during the height of the Sodalur dynasty that ruled Pohnpei. The Sodalurs were the island's traditional rulers, and they apparently chose to build their capital on artificial islands as a demonstration of their power and connection to the sea. But the engineering challenges involved in building Nan Madol are staggering. The basalt columns used in construction were quarried from sites elsewhere on Pohnpei, some located several miles away from Nan Madol. How did the builders transport stones weighing several tons across difficult terrain and then precisely position them in the water? Modern engineers have studied this problem extensively. The builders would have needed to develop sophisticated methods for moving heavy stones without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or large domestic animals. Pohnpei has no native animals larger than fruit bats, and the islanders had no access to horses, oxen, or other beasts of burden. One theory suggests that the builders used a combination of ropes, wooden rollers, and human labor to move the stones overland to the coast. From there, they might have loaded them onto large rafts or boats for transport to the construction sites. This would have required careful engineering to ensure that heavily loaded boats didn't sink in the shallow waters around Nan Madol. But even getting the stones to the site doesn't explain how they were precisely positioned to create the complex structures we see today. Many of the basalt columns are fitted together so tightly that you can't slip a knife blade between them. This level of precision would be challenging even with modern construction equipment. The purpose of Nan Madol is almost as mysterious as its construction methods. The artificial islands were clearly designed for different functions. Some contained residential buildings where the ruling elite lived. Others supported ceremonial structures for religious rituals. Still, others appear to have been used for food preparation or storage. The largest and most impressive structure is Nan Duwas, a massive walled enclosure that served as a royal mortuary complex. The walls of Nan Duwas rise over 20 feet high and are built from basalt columns arranged in a distinctive log cabin style. Inside this enclosure, archaeologists have found evidence of elaborate burial practices and ritual activities. But why build such a complex on artificial islands? The builders of Nan Madol could have constructed their city on the main island of Pohnpei, where the ground was solid and construction would have been much easier. Instead, they chose to build in the water, creating a city that could only be reached by boat. Some researchers suggest that the water location had strategic advantages. The artificial islands were easier to defend against attack, and the surrounding canals provided natural barriers against invaders. The city's location also gave its rulers control over sea traffic around the island. Others proposed that the choice to build on water had religious or symbolic significance. In many Pacific cultures, water is associated with spiritual power and the realm of the ancestors. Building their capital on artificial islands might have been a way for the Sodalur rulers to demonstrate their connection to supernatural forces. The construction of Nan Madol would have required an enormous investment of human labor. Estimates suggest that it would have taken the full-time work of hundreds of people for several decades to complete the project. This represents a massive commitment of resources for a relatively small island population. This raises questions about the social organization of ancient Pohnpei. How did the Sodalur rulers convince or compel so many people to work on this project? What kind of economic system supported such massive construction efforts? And how did the island's ecosystem support a population large enough to undertake such work? Archaeological evidence suggests that ancient Pohnpei had a much larger population than the island supports today. The builders of Nan Madol had developed sophisticated agricultural techniques, including terraced farming and aquaculture systems, that allowed them to support thousands of people. But the prosperity that enabled the construction of Nan Madol didn't last forever. By the time European explorers reached Pohnpei in the 19th century, Nan Madol was already abandoned and partially ruined. The Sodalur dynasty had fallen centuries earlier, apparently overthrown by invaders from another island. Local traditions describe this conquest in terms that suggest it was a traumatic event that marked the end of an era. The conquerors, led by a warrior named Isokalekal, are said to have defeated the Sodalurs through superior military tactics, and possibly with the help of supernatural powers. The fall of Nan Madol represents more than just a political change. It marked the end of the megalithic building tradition in Micronesia. Later rulers of Pohnpei never attempted to build anything approaching the scale and sophistication of the artificial city. Today, Nan Madol is slowly being reclaimed by the sea and jungle. Rising sea levels and storm damage are gradually destroying the ancient structures. Mangrove trees grow through the ruins, and high tides regularly flood the ancient plazas and buildings. Efforts to preserve and study Nan Madol are ongoing, but they face significant challenges. The site's remote location makes it difficult for archaeologists to work there for extended periods. The tropical climate causes rapid deterioration of exposed structures. And the rising sea levels that threaten many Pacific islands pose a particular danger to this water-based archaeological site. Nan Madol remains one of the most impressive examples of ancient Pacific engineering and architecture. It demonstrates that the peoples of Oceania developed sophisticated building techniques and complex societies long before European contact. Yet many questions about its construction, purpose, and ultimate abandonment remain unanswered, making it one of the Pacific's greatest archaeological mysteries. The Uffington White Horse, the ancient symbol no one understands. Carved into a hillside in Oxfordshire, England, is one of the most enigmatic prehistoric artworks in Europe, the Uffington White Horse. This massive figure, stretching 374 feet from nose to tail, has watched over the English countryside for at least 3,000 years. Yet despite centuries of study, no one can definitively explain why it was created, what it represents, or who made it. The white horse isn't a realistic depiction of a horse. Instead, it's a highly stylized, flowing design that looks almost modern in its abstract simplicity. The figure is created by trenches cut into the hillside and filled with crushed white chalk, making it visible from miles away. From ground level, the horse is difficult to make out, but from the air or distant hills, it appears as a brilliant white symbol against the green landscape. What makes the Uffington White Horse truly mysterious is its age. For centuries, people assumed it was relatively recent, perhaps created during the Anglo-Saxon period, or even later. But scientific dating techniques have revealed that it's actually much older, possibly dating back to the Bronze Age, around 1000 BCE. This dating makes the White Horse one of the oldest surviving examples of landscape art in Europe. It was already ancient when the Romans arrived in Britain, and it had been a landmark for over 1,000 years before the Anglo-Saxons settled the area. The people who created it lived in a world without writing, leaving us no explanation for their monumental artwork. The location of the White Horse is significant. It's positioned on the upper slopes of White Horse Hill, part of the Berkshire Downs, in an area that was clearly important to prehistoric peoples. The hill is topped by Uffington Castle, an Iron Age hill fort, and nearby is Wayland's Smithy, a Neolithic burial chamber that's even older than the horse itself. This concentration of ancient monuments suggests that the area had special significance for prehistoric communities over many centuries. The White Horse might have been part of a larger sacred landscape that included burial sites, ceremonial centers, and defensive positions. But what did the horse represent? The most obvious interpretation is that it depicts a real horse, perhaps commemorating a famous animal or celebrating the importance of horses to the local people. Horses were certainly significant in Bronze Age Britain. They were used for transportation, warfare, and probably had religious significance as well. However, the highly stylized nature of the figure has led some researchers to suggest alternative interpretations. The flowing, abstract design doesn't look much like a real horse. Some have suggested it might represent a dragon or other mythological creature. Others propose it could be a symbol with astronomical significance, perhaps representing a constellation or marking important celestial events. The astronomical theory is particularly intriguing because the White Horse is positioned to be visible from a wide area of the surrounding countryside. If it was designed to mark astronomical events, such as the rising or setting of particular stars, it would have served as a giant calendar for prehistoric communities across the region. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Uffington White Horse is that it has survived for thousands of years. Chalk figures like this require regular maintenance to remain visible. Without periodic cleaning and recutting, they would quickly become overgrown with grass and disappear within a few decades. This means that for over 3,000 years, successive generations of people have taken responsibility for maintaining the White Horse. Through the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Roman period, Anglo-Saxon era, medieval times, and into the modern era, someone has always cared enough about this ancient symbol to keep it visible. Historical records show that the maintenance of the White Horse was a community responsibility. Local people would gather periodically to clean the trenches, remove vegetation, and add fresh chalk. These scouring events were often combined with festivals and celebrations, suggesting that caring for the horse was seen as both a duty and a privilege. The fact that the White Horse has been continuously maintained is extraordinary. Most ancient artworks have been lost, destroyed, or forgotten over time. Yet this prehistoric symbol has remained a focal point for human communities for millennia, despite the fact that its original meaning has been completely lost. During the medieval period, new legends grew up around the White Horse. Local people told stories about how it had been created to commemorate King Alfred's victory over the Danish Vikings at the Battle of Ashdown in 871 CE. While this legend has been disproved by scientific dating, it shows how each generation created new meanings for the ancient symbol. The 18th and 19th centuries saw renewed interest in the White Horse as part of the Romantic movement's fascination with ancient Britain. Writers and artists celebrated it as a symbol of English identity and connection to the prehistoric past. The regular scouring events became popular tourist attractions, drawing visitors from across England. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed new details about the White Horse's construction and history. Ground-penetrating radar has shown that the current figure might not be in exactly the same position as the original. Over the centuries of maintenance and recutting, the horse appears to have gradually shifted and changed shape. Analysis of soil samples from the trenches has revealed evidence of different periods of construction and reconstruction. Some sections of the horse show evidence of having been recut multiple times, while others appear to preserve more of the original Bronze Age work. Recent discoveries have also revealed that the Uffington White Horse wasn't unique. Similar chalk figures once existed elsewhere in England, but most have been lost over time. This suggests that creating large landscape artworks was a more widespread practice in prehistoric Britain than previously realized. The white horse has also been studied for what it reveals about prehistoric society and technology. Creating such a large, precise figure would have required careful planning and coordination. The designers would have needed to work out the proportions and layout from ground level, then supervise the work of many people cutting the trenches. This implies a level of social organization and technical skill that challenges simple stereotypes about prehistoric peoples. The creators of the white horse were sophisticated planners who could conceive and execute complex projects that would remain visible for thousands of years. Today, the Uffington White Horse continues to fascinate visitors and researchers. It's maintained by English Heritage and the National Trust, continuing the ancient tradition of community care for this mysterious symbol. But despite all our modern techniques and accumulated knowledge, the white horse keeps its secrets. We still don't know why it was created, what it meant to its makers, or how they managed to design something so perfectly suited to survive the millennia. Ratanabá, the Brazilian Atlantis of the Amazon. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, researchers have discovered evidence of something that was supposed to be impossible: a lost civilization that built massive cities, sophisticated road networks, and complex agricultural systems in one of the world's most challenging environments. This discovery has led some to call the Amazon the location of a Brazilian Atlantis, an advanced civilization that thrived for over 1,000 years before mysteriously disappearing. For centuries, the prevailing view of the Amazon was that it was a pristine wilderness that had never supported large human populations. The rainforest was seen as too hostile for complex civilizations. The poor soils, dense vegetation, and challenging climate seemed to make large-scale agriculture and urban development impossible. But this view began to change in the 1972 and 1982 when aerial surveys started revealing strange geometric patterns in the forest canopy. These patterns, visible only from the air, showed regular shapes that suggested human construction: perfectly straight lines, geometric enclosures, and earthworks that stretched for miles through the jungle. The breakthrough came when researchers began using LiDAR technology, laser scanning from aircraft that can see through the forest canopy, to map the ground beneath. These scans revealed an astonishing truth: the Amazon is filled with the remains of ancient cities, roads, and agricultural systems that had been completely hidden by the jungle. One of the most impressive discoveries has been in the region that some researchers call Ratanabá, named after local indigenous legends about a great city that once existed in the forest. While no single massive city has been found, the area contains evidence of numerous interconnected settlements that together formed what might have been the largest urban complex in the pre-Columbian Americas. The ancient Amazonian cities weren't built of stone, like Maya or Inca settlements. Instead, they were constructed primarily from earth and wood, materials that have been reclaimed by the jungle over the centuries. But the scale of these settlements was enormous. Some individual sites cover areas larger than many modern cities. The most remarkable feature of these ancient Amazonian settlements is their integration with the natural environment. Rather than clearing large areas of forest, the ancient inhabitants developed sophisticated agroforestry systems that allowed them to support large populations while maintaining much of the original ecosystem. They created forest gardens, where useful trees, medicinal plants, and food crops were cultivated together in complex multi-story systems. These forests looked natural, but were actually carefully managed landscapes that could support much higher human populations than virgin rainforest. Archaeological evidence suggests that these managed forests covered millions of acres across the Amazon basin. The ancient inhabitants had essentially transformed huge areas of rainforest into productive agricultural systems that were so well integrated with the natural environment that they appeared to be unchanged wilderness. The people who created these systems also built impressive earthworks. Geometric enclosures called geoglyphs have been found across the western Amazon. These are massive earthen structures, some covering areas larger than several football fields, that were created by moving millions of tons of soil. The purpose of these geoglyphs is still debated. Some appear to have been ceremonial centers, others might have been defensive structures, and still others could have served astronomical or calendrical functions. Many are perfectly circular or square, demonstrating sophisticated surveying and construction techniques. The road systems connecting these ancient settlements were equally impressive. LiDAR surveys have revealed networks of raised roads, some stretching for hundreds of miles through the forest. These roads were built up above the flood level and paved with clay and gravel, allowing for year-round travel, even during the rainy season. The engineering required to build these road systems was remarkable. The ancient builders had to navigate around rivers, swamps, and other natural obstacles while maintaining relatively straight routes over long distances. Some roads include sophisticated drainage systems and bridges that demonstrate advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering. Carbon dating of materials from these sites suggests that the complex Amazonian civilization reached its peak between 1000 and 1500 CE. At its height, the region might have supported a population of several million people, far more than live there today. But then, sometime in the late 15th or early 16th century, this entire civilization collapsed. The cities were abandoned, the road systems fell into disuse, and the carefully managed forests began reverting to wild jungle. Within a few generations, one of the world's largest civilizations had virtually disappeared. The timing of this collapse coincides with the arrival of Europeans in South America. While European explorers didn't penetrate deeply into the Amazon until much later, their arrival on the continent brought diseases that spread far ahead of direct contact. Smallpox, measles, and other European diseases decimated indigenous populations throughout the Americas. It's estimated that up to 90% of the Amazon's indigenous population died from disease in the century following European arrival. This demographic catastrophe would have made it impossible to maintain the complex systems that supported Amazonian civilization. Without human management, the cities and roads were quickly reclaimed by the jungle. The discovery of this lost Amazonian civilization has important implications for our understanding of both human history and environmental science. It shows that the Amazon that Europeans encountered in the 16th century wasn't a pristine wilderness, but rather a landscape that was recovering from one of history's greatest demographic catastrophes. The managed forests, created by ancient Amazonians, were incredibly sophisticated examples of sustainable development. They supported large populations while maintaining biodiversity and forest cover. Understanding how these systems worked could provide valuable insights for modern conservation and development efforts. Recent research has also revealed that many of the tree species that dominate today's Amazon rainforest were actually encouraged and cultivated by ancient peoples. The forest we see today is partly the result of thousands of years of human management, not just natural evolution. The discovery of Amazonian civilization has also challenged assumptions about the relationship between complex societies and environmental impact. These ancient peoples created one of the world's largest civilizations while actually increasing the forest's biodiversity and productivity. They prove that human development doesn't necessarily require environmental destruction. Modern indigenous peoples of the Amazon maintain some knowledge of the ancient systems. Their traditional practices often incorporate techniques that were developed by their ancestors thousands of years ago. This traditional knowledge is proving invaluable for researchers trying to understand how the ancient systems worked. The search for more evidence of Amazonian civilization continues. Each year, new LiDAR surveys reveal additional sites, and climate change is occasionally exposing ruins that have been hidden for centuries. Drought conditions sometimes cause rivers to drop to unusual levels, revealing stone structures and earthworks that are normally underwater. The lost civilization of the Amazon represents one of humanity's greatest achievements in sustainable development. It also serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly even the most sophisticated civilizations can disappear. The Brazilian Atlantis of Ratanabá may be gone, but its legacy continues to teach us about the possibilities and fragility of human civilization. The Rongorongo script, the forgotten language of Easter Island. On Easter Island, known to its inhabitants as Rapa Nui, lies one of the world's last undeciphered writing systems. The Rongorongo script consists of hundreds of small wooden tablets covered with intricate symbols that represent one of only 3 or 4 independently invented writing systems in human history. Yet despite over 150 years of study, no one has been able to definitively decode what these mysterious symbols mean. The Rongorongo tablets were first brought to international attention in the 1860s, when French missionaries arrived on Easter Island and discovered that the islanders possessed wooden boards covered with strange hieroglyphic symbols. The missionaries were told that these boards contained important information about the island's history and religious traditions. But by that time, very few islanders could still read the script. What makes Rongorongo particularly remarkable is its apparent independence from other writing systems. Most of the world's scripts can be traced back to a few original inventions: the Sumerian cuneiform system, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Chinese characters, and Mesoamerican glyphs. But Rongorongo appears to be completely unrelated to any of these traditions. This independence is especially striking, given Easter Island's isolation. Located over 2,000 miles from the nearest populated land, Easter Island was one of the last places on Earth to be settled by humans. The Polynesian voyagers who discovered the island around 1200 CE would have had no contact with literate civilizations. Yet somehow, they or their descendants developed one of humanity's most sophisticated writing systems. The Rongorongo symbols themselves are beautifully crafted. Each character is a small detailed drawing that often depicts recognizable objects: birds, fish, plants, human figures, and geometric shapes. The symbols are arranged in neat rows across the wooden tablets, following a unique pattern called reverse boustrophedon. Each line is written in the opposite direction from the line above it, and the symbols are rotated 180 degrees. This writing pattern means that to read Rongorongo, you would start at the bottom left of a tablet, read from left to right, then flip the tablet upside down and read the next line from left to right again. This continues up the tablet, with each line requiring the reader to rotate their perspective. Only about 25 authentic Rongorongo tablets survive today, scattered in museums around the world. Most are made from carved wooden boards, though a few are inscribed on stone or carved into rock faces on the island itself. The tablets vary in size, from small handheld pieces to boards several feet long. The subject matter of the tablets remains largely unknown, but clues from the few partially understood passages suggest they might contain genealogies, creation myths, religious chants, or historical records. Some tablets appear to contain repetitive patterns that might represent ritual formulas or ceremonial instructions. Attempts to decipher Rongorongo have been complicated by the cultural destruction that occurred on Easter Island during the 19th century. European diseases, slave raids, and cultural suppression destroyed much of the island's traditional knowledge. By the time serious scholarly attention was focused on the script, there were no living people who could read it fluently. The last known person who claimed to be able to read Rongorongo was Metoro Taware, who worked with researchers in the 1882nd and 1892nd. However, Metoro's interpretations were inconsistent and often contradictory, leading scholars to question whether he actually understood the script or was improvising based on the images he saw. Modern decipherment efforts have used various approaches. Some researchers have tried to identify patterns in the symbol sequences, looking for repetitions or structures that might indicate grammatical rules. Others have focused on comparing the symbols to known Polynesian words or concepts. Computer analysis has revealed some intriguing patterns in the script. Certain symbol combinations appear repeatedly across different tablets, suggesting they might represent common words or phrases. Some symbols seem to function as determinatives, markers that indicate the category or type of the word that follows. One of the most promising recent approaches has been to study rongorongo in the context of other Polynesian oral traditions. Many Pacific cultures maintained elaborate oral literature that was chanted or recited during ceremonies. The rongorongo tablets might represent written versions of similar oral traditions. This theory is supported by the way symbols are arranged on the tablets. Many passages show rhythmic patterns that would make sense if they were meant to be chanted or sung. The reverse boustrophedon writing style might have been designed to aid memorization during recitation. Some researchers have also noted similarities between rongorongo symbols and petroglyphs found elsewhere in Polynesia. While these similarities don't prove a direct connection, they suggest that the symbolic vocabulary used in rongorongo might have roots in broader Polynesian cultural traditions. The content of the tablets has been another focus of research. Analysis of symbol frequencies and distributions suggests that different tablets might contain different types of text. Some appear to be repetitive and formulaic, possibly representing ritual chants or genealogies. Others show more varied vocabulary and might contain narratives or historical accounts. Recent discoveries have added new material to the rongorongo corpus. In 1995, a new tablet was discovered in a private collection, and in 2018, researchers identified additional rongorongo inscriptions on artifacts that had been misidentified in museum collections. Each new text provides additional data for decipherment efforts. Advanced imaging techniques have also revealed previously unknown inscriptions. High-resolution photography and 3D scanning have uncovered faded or worn symbols that weren't visible to earlier researchers. Some tablets that appeared to contain only a few symbols have been found to have extensive additional text. The study of rongorongo has been revolutionized by digital humanities approaches. Computer databases now contain detailed records of every known symbol and its variations. Pattern recognition software can identify similarities and relationships that would be impossible to detect through manual analysis. Despite these advances, rongorongo remains largely undeciphered. While researchers have identified some probable meanings for individual symbols and have proposed grammatical structures for the script, there's still no consensus on how to read extended passages or what the tablets actually say. The mystery of rongorongo is particularly poignant because it represents the voice of a people whose culture was largely destroyed by European contact. The Easter Islanders developed one of humanity's most unique writing systems, used it to record their most important cultural knowledge, and then lost the ability to read their own creation within just a few generations. Whether rongorongo will ever be fully deciphered remains uncertain. Unlike other ancient scripts that were decoded using bilingual texts or known historical names, rongorongo exists in complete isolation. There are no parallel texts in known languages, no historical records that might provide clues to its content, and no living tradition that preserves its reading. Yet the script continues to fascinate researchers and the public alike. It represents one of humanity's most isolated achievements in intellectual development and stands as a testament to the universal human drive to record and preserve knowledge. The wooden tablets of Easter Island guard their secrets jealously, but they also remind us of the remarkable diversity of human creativity and intelligence. The Giant of Castelnau, the discovery of an ancient giant. In 1890, French anthropologist Georges Vacher de la Puge was excavating a Bronze Age cemetery near the village of Castelnau-le-Lez in southern France when he made a discovery that would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about human evolution and ancient peoples. In one of the graves, he found skeletal remains that appeared to belong to a human of extraordinary size, an individual who would have stood nearly 8 feet tall, far larger than any known ancient population. The discovery, known as the Giant of Castelnau, consisted of several bone fragments, including pieces of skull, jaw, arm bones, and leg bones. When Lapouge measured these remains and calculated the probable height of the individual, he arrived at an estimate of approximately 3.5 meters, or about 11 feet tall. Even conservative estimates based on the largest bones suggested a height of at least 7 to 8 feet, making this individual a true giant by any standard. The bones themselves were remarkably robust and thick, suggesting not just unusual height, but also extraordinary physical strength. The skull fragments indicated a brain case much larger than normal humans, and the jaw bones were so massive that they suggested this individual had proportionally larger teeth and facial features. Lapouge's discovery was initially met with great excitement in anthropological circles. The late 19th century was a time of intense interest in human evolution and variation. Scientists were eager to understand the full range of human physical development and were open to the possibility that ancient peoples might have been significantly different from modern humans. However, the Giant of Castelnau also created controversy from the beginning. Some scientists questioned whether the bones really came from a single individual or whether they might represent several different people buried together. Others suggested that the unusual size might be due to pathological conditions rather than normal variation. The dating of the remains placed them in the Bronze Age, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. This was significant because it meant the giant had lived during a period when human populations in Europe were supposedly physically similar to modern people. If the measurements were accurate, it suggested that Bronze Age populations included individuals of truly extraordinary size. What made the discovery even more intriguing was that it wasn't unique. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeologists reported finding other oversized skeletal remains at various sites across Europe and North America. These discoveries created a body of evidence suggesting that unusually large humans might have been more common in ancient times than previously believed. However, as anthropological science became more rigorous in the 20th century, many of these giant discoveries came under scrutiny. Improved understanding of bone development and pathology revealed that some supposed giants were actually normal-sized individuals whose bones had been distorted by disease or whose measurements had been incorrectly calculated. Medical conditions like acromegaly and gigantism can cause individuals to grow to exceptional heights, but they also typically cause distinctive bone deformities and health problems that limit lifespan. When researchers re-examined many historical giant discoveries with this knowledge, they found evidence of pathological conditions rather than normal human variation. The Giant of Castelnau became caught up in this broader re-evaluation. Critics pointed out that the original measurements were made using techniques that would be considered inadequate by modern standards. The bone fragments were incomplete, making accurate height calculations difficult, and no detailed medical analysis had been done to rule out pathological causes for the unusual size. More problematically, the actual bone specimens from Castelnau have been lost. They disappeared sometime in the early 20th century, possibly during World War I when many museum collections were disrupted or destroyed. Without the original specimens, it's impossible to conduct modern analysis to verify or refute the original claims. This loss of evidence has made the Giant of Castelnau a subject of ongoing debate. Supporters argue that the careful documentation by Lapouge, who was a trained scientist, provides credible evidence for the existence of unusually large ancient humans. Critics contend that without the actual bones, there's no way to verify the claims or rule out measurement errors and pathological conditions. The controversy has been fueled by the fact that reports of giant skeletons continue to surface occasionally in archaeological contexts. In recent decades, there have been claims of giant remains found in various parts of the world, though most of these have either been debunked as hoaxes or explained by natural factors. One of the problems with evaluating these claims is that human height can vary considerably due to environmental and genetic factors. Good nutrition and favorable living conditions can produce populations with average heights significantly above historical norms. Some modern populations, particularly in Northern Europe and parts of Africa, include many individuals who would have been considered giants in ancient times. Additionally, certain genetic conditions can cause exceptional height without the severe health problems typically associated with pathological gigantism. Marfan syndrome and other connective tissue disorders can produce very tall individuals who might live relatively normal lives, especially in societies where their size was considered advantageous rather than problematic. Archaeological evidence does suggest that some ancient populations were taller on average than previously believed. Skeletal remains from certain European sites show that some Bronze Age and early Iron Age peoples were quite robust and tall compared to later historical populations. This might reflect better nutrition, less disease, or genetic factors that were later diluted by population mixing. The question of ancient giants has also been complicated by cultural and religious factors. Many mythological traditions around the world include stories of giant humans who lived in ancient times. The Bible contains references to giants like Goliath and the Nephilim. Greek mythology describes the Titans and other oversized beings. Similar stories appear in Norse, Celtic, and many other cultural traditions. Some researchers have suggested that these mythological accounts might preserve cultural memories of real populations of unusually large humans. According to this theory, the widespread nature of giant legends suggests they might be based on encounters with actual groups of tall people rather than pure imagination. However, most mainstream anthropologists remain skeptical of claims about ancient giant populations. They argue that while individual giants certainly existed in ancient times, just as they do today, there's no credible evidence for entire populations or cultures of giant people. The modern consensus is that reports of ancient giants usually result from measurement errors, pathological conditions, incomplete skeletal remains, or misidentification of non-human bones. The few genuinely large, ancient individuals that have been scientifically documented appear to have suffered from medical conditions that caused their unusual growth. The Giant of Castelnau remains a tantalizing mystery because the evidence has been lost. We can't conduct modern analysis to determine whether this was truly an individual of exceptional size, a person suffering from a growth disorder, or simply the result of 19th century measurement errors. What we can say is that the discovery reflects the genuine scientific excitement of the late 19th century, when researchers were still uncovering the basic facts about human evolution and variation. Whether the Giant of Castelnau was real or not, the search for understanding human diversity continues to drive archaeological and anthropological research around the world. The mystery serves as a reminder that our understanding of the past is always incomplete and subject to revision. New discoveries continue to surprise us and challenge our assumptions about what ancient peoples were like and what they were capable of achieving. The Lost Tomb of Genghis Khan, the greatest burial mystery. In 1227, the greatest conqueror in human history died somewhere in the vast steppes of Mongolia. Genghis Khan had built an empire that stretched from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean, controlling more territory than any ruler before or since. Yet despite his enormous historical importance, the location of his tomb remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. According to Mongol tradition and historical accounts, Genghis Khan's burial was deliberately hidden to prevent enemies from desecrating his remains or stealing the treasures buried with him. The secrecy surrounding his death and burial was so complete that even today, over 800 years later, no one knows where the great Khan was laid to rest. The mystery begins with the circumstances of Genghis Khan's death. He died during a military campaign against the Western Xia Kingdom in what is now northwestern China. Different accounts give different explanations for his death. Some say he fell from his horse, others suggest he was killed in battle, and still others claim he died from illness or injury. What all accounts agree on is that his death was kept secret from all but his closest advisors. The Mongol army continued its campaign for several weeks, with the Khan's death concealed from both his own troops and his enemies. This secrecy was maintained to prevent the collapse of military discipline and to ensure the succession could be properly managed. When the army finally returned to Mongolia with the Khan's body, extraordinary measures were taken to hide the burial location. According to traditional accounts, the funeral procession killed anyone they encountered along the route to ensure no witnesses could reveal the path to the tomb. The burial site was said to be somewhere in the sacred Burkhan Khaldun mountain region of Mongolia, an area that was holy to Genghis Khan's Mongol tribe. After the burial, the tomb site was allegedly obliterated to remove all traces of its location. Some accounts describe a river being diverted to flow over the grave. Others claim that a forest was planted to disguise the site. Still others suggest that thousands of horses were driven over the area to trample away any signs of recent digging. To further ensure secrecy, the soldiers who participated in the burial were reportedly killed, and even the soldiers who killed the burial party were themselves executed. This chain of elimination was designed to take the secret of the tomb's location to the grave, along with the Khan himself. But the secrecy that was meant to protect Genghis Khan's remains has also made his tomb one of the most sought-after archaeological prizes in the world. The potential significance of such a discovery is enormous. The tomb would likely contain not just the remains of one of history's most important figures, but also treasures from across his vast empire and artifacts that could provide unprecedented insights into Mongol culture and beliefs. The search for Genghis Khan's tomb has been ongoing for centuries. Chinese, Mongol, and later Russian and European explorers have all attempted to locate the burial site. During the Soviet era, the search was officially discouraged because Genghis Khan was considered a symbol of Mongol nationalism that threatened Soviet control over Mongolia. Modern searches have used increasingly sophisticated technology. Satellite imagery has been used to identify potential burial sites based on landscape features and vegetation patterns. Ground-penetrating radar has been employed to search for underground structures or anomalies that might indicate a tomb. Even thermal imaging has been tried, looking for temperature differences that might reveal buried architecture. One of the most systematic searches was conducted by a joint American-Mongolian expedition in the early 2000s. This project used advanced archaeological techniques to survey large areas of the Burkhan Khaldun region, looking for any signs of Mongol-era construction or burial activity. The expedition identified several promising sites, including areas where the landscape showed signs of ancient human modification. However, none of these investigations produced definitive evidence of the Khan's tomb. The searches were also complicated by the sensitive political and cultural issues surrounding Genghis Khan's legacy in modern Mongolia. Many Mongols believe that Genghis Khan's tomb should remain undisturbed. According to traditional beliefs, disturbing the great Khan's rest could bring catastrophe to the Mongol people. This spiritual concern, combined with practical issues about tourism and cultural preservation, has made the Mongolian government cautious about supporting large-scale archaeological searches. The challenge of finding the tomb is compounded by the vast area that must be searched. Genghis Khan's empire was enormous, and while tradition places his burial in Mongolia, he could theoretically be buried anywhere from Eastern Europe to China. Even focusing on the most likely areas in Mongolia, the search zone covers thousands of square miles of rugged terrain. The landscape itself has also changed significantly over the past 800 years. Rivers have changed course, forests have grown and been cut down, and human activity has modified the natural features that might have served as landmarks for the original burial site. What might have been an obvious location to 13th century Mongols could now be completely unrecognizable. Recent archaeological work in Mongolia has revealed that the region contains many more ancient sites than previously suspected. Excavations have uncovered Mongol-era settlements, cemeteries, and ceremonial sites that provide insights into the culture and practices of Genghis Khan's people. However, none of these discoveries has provided clear clues to the location of the Khan's tomb. Some researchers have suggested that the tomb might not be a single burial site at all. Mongol burial practices sometimes involved multiple ceremonies and locations. It's possible that Genghis Khan's body was divided, with different parts buried in different locations, or that decoy tombs were created to confuse potential grave robbers. The search has also been complicated by the activities of treasure hunters and amateur archaeologists. Over the centuries, many people have claimed to have found Genghis Khan's tomb, usually based on dubious evidence or wishful thinking. These false discoveries have created a mythology around the search that sometimes obscures serious archaeological efforts. Modern Mongolia has a complex relationship with the legacy of Genghis Khan. While he's celebrated as the founder of the Mongol nation and one of history's greatest leaders, his tomb has also become a symbol of cultural autonomy and resistance to foreign influence. Many Mongols believe that the tomb should be found and protected by Mongols themselves, rather than by international archaeological expeditions. The mystery of Genghis Khan's tomb represents more than just an archaeological puzzle. It embodies questions about cultural heritage, national identity, and the relationship between the past and present. Whether the tomb will ever be found, and whether it should be, remains one of the most debated questions in archaeology. If Genghis Khan's tomb is ever discovered, it would undoubtedly be one of the most important archaeological finds in history. But until that day comes, the great Khan continues to guard his secrets, hidden somewhere in the vast landscape he once ruled with unparalleled power.